We'll officially open our first of 4 events online. This is our Canadian Family Office Conference, obviously, and we have a very interesting program for everybody here today. So for those of you who thought we'll never be able to put on an online conference together, we're here to prove you right. It's not what we normally do, so probably you're going to see a lot of faults during the day, so I think that's going to be the fun part. We're doing each conference in 2 parts, as you've noticed. I think we're special with that. I don't know if anybody else does that. That's because we don't believe families are going to sit for 6 hours in front of a screen. So we basically do everything in 2 parts. First part is today. The second part is November. What is the second part? The second part is November 5th, and our US conference will be November 12th and November 18th. We are, in a way, we're happy to do an online conference, no geographical boundaries, and especially we love to do coffee breaks because that's the only way we can do as many coffee breaks as we want, and you guys are paying for the coffee. So I guess in that sense, we are very happy about that. So as you may know, for us, the Canadian market is one of the most interesting markets out there. This year, we were supposed to do our first conference in Vancouver and Montreal. And basically, we'll soon start a panel where most of the members are from Montreal, very good friends of ours. And so we having basically our Toronto conference that's been going on for a while now. And hopefully next year, we'll meet all of you in person, both in Montreal and Vancouver. We built a very interesting program today and on November 5th. Dealing with everything that families need to know, everything they care about, anything from investments to philanthropy, to technology, to next generation, everything that's under the sun, and of course the financial markets. Scotia will speak about that. You know, they're talking about adjusting at times like this. They talk about the fact that during crisis, you can actually find opportunities, and many of the families that I've spoken to, including Saputo and including Sheraton family from the US, both shared with me when we did our weekly sessions that their business started during the Great Depression when things were very, very bad, and they took bold moves, and that's exactly when you need to adjust. So here we are adjusting. That's our version of adjustment, doing an online conference, even though we did manage to hold an in-person conference 2 or so weeks ago at the World Trade Center's rooftop, thanks to our good friends of the Sylvan family that own New York's largest terrace. But I think what we like about this online version is that families from all around can join us, and that's indeed the situation today. And just so you know, we have a great program. We'll open up with Philanthropy, which we'll talk about a very interesting world that basically families support more now. And I would have thought that that's not the case because they would be worried about their own assets, but apparently not so. We'll be later talking to Cayman Islands and what's going on there. We'll talk about the financial markets with Scotia. And then we have a session about succession and governance held by David Bentall. Bentall is one of the most well-known families in Vancouver. And later on, we have the real estate session that Fasken are going to be leading with great families. And we'll finish this day with Patricia Saputo when we're going to talk about the perspective of a family member and a financial advisor during COVID-19. So I am very happy to start our first session. So good morning, Sylvan, Kathy, Sharon, good morning. I believe both Kathy and Sharon are in Montreal, and Sylvan, Mr. Adams, is in Israel.
I'm in Spain.
Okay, so I was wrong already. I didn't even start the conference and I'm already wrong. You're in Spain. Enjoy the food. So let me open the session. When I spoke to one of the families about the importance of talking about philanthropy, it's not taken for granted. I was asked what's in it for us. I think when families share what they do, they influence others. And I think that's the main reason. We don't gain anything out of that. We're not getting any support beyond the fact that every conference of ours has philanthropy as a main topic. And many times it's the families that build those sessions, like the Firestone family that built our philanthropy panel for years at our US conferences. So our topic today is how the philanthropic landscape has changed since COVID began. And I have a panel of three distinguished guests. A world-renowned philanthropist, the head of Canada's largest community foundation, and the executive director, I jumped a line here. A world-renowned philanthropist, obviously Mr. Adams, that I don't know how many of you know, but what he does on bicycle is also as impressive as his philanthropic work. The head of Canada's largest community foundation, Kathy, and the executive director of the Canadian Friends of Tel Aviv University, a charity that benefits from the generosity of the Canadians, my good friend, Sharon Fraenkel. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Maybe I'll start with Kathy. You had Canada's largest community foundation. Tell us a little about your operation and services.
Thank you, Denny. So in 3 words, we have a very simple operation. We promote philanthropy. That's what we do. And we do that by helping families manage their giving in the most tax-effective way, and to try and keep it simple. Something we've coined smart philanthropy. So basically people open funds with us and we help them determine the most tax-effective way to do it. And then we manage everything for them. So in essence, what we do is we help them focus on what they want to accomplish, their philanthropic dreams, their aspirations, and we remove all of the administrative burdens. So no more financial statements to prepare, no compliance issues. They don't have to deal with CRA. We do everything from issuing grants to following up on receipts, no bookkeeping, really no more administrative burden. Even the investment management is managed by us. So really we're a full service operation, and I'm simplifying it quite a bit, but our real goal is to promote philanthropy in a major way. And today we have 2,400 clients that we serve, some very big, some small, but combined they represent $1.5 billion in assets that are all destined for philanthropy. So that does make us Canada's largest community foundation. And even when we compare ourselves south of the border in the US, I think we're like the 5th or 6th largest community foundation possibly in the world. So basically, though we were created in 1971 to serve the Jewish community, and many of our fund holders and clients are Jewish, today we serve absolutely everyone. So every denomination of Canadians are working with us at the Jewish Community Foundation. And collectively, this is, I think, the most important step is our impact on philanthropy. Collectively, they distributed $114 million last year to charities. And of course, that includes many Jewish causes, but it also includes universities and hospitals and many, many charities across the board that impact all Canadians and people around the world. Because we do have a lot of expertise in doing international projects as well. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. That's our service.
You know, I was doing a call with one of the more famous names in Canada, and she just told me, I was just off the call with my philanthropic advisory, and you know, I would have thought in the beginning when it started that people would be more worried about their own assets and what, you know, the losses they're experiencing and all the, and donate maybe less, but apparently that's not the case. So I wanted to ask you, what changes have you observed in the philanthropic landscape in general and during COVID?
Yeah, so what I've observed personally is the tremendous generosity of people at this time. Like, people have been extremely generous. Our revenue in donation is up from last year considerably. And people are responding in a major way. And I want to say it's not just about the crisis, because it would be really sad if that's all it was about. So our fundholders have been generous. We ourselves as a foundation responded to the COVID crisis right away with our own funds, because we do have a reserve, and the modest fees that we charge allow us to do our own philanthropy. So when COVID hit in March, we immediately deployed almost $1.5 million for food relief and services to seniors. And we did that, and it was important to do that. But what I've observed is that philanthropists are still doing all the other things that make our society what it is. I mean, we have to focus on the crisis, but we have to continue to focus on innovation and improving society. And of course, Sylvan Adams has a lot more to say on that than I do, because he's leading by example in making sure that we have a society that's rich and that's forward thinking, and not just focusing on the immediate need. Somebody has to do it, and we're happy to be doing it and doing the food relief and everything else. But what I've observed is philanthropists continuing to support the causes that they care about most, because that's really what's going to change our world.
And thank you. I have some questions to Mr. Adams that
Before you ask a question,
yeah,
I think Kathy was being very modest, and she forgot to mention that I am the largest client of the Jewish Community Foundation of Montreal. So she can put in a plug for, so I can put in a plug for her and for the Jewish Community Foundation, because I'm a very satisfied client. You know, she was describing a little bit the structure and how the JCF provides all of the provides counsel, provides services, provides administration to the clients. So I am a satisfied customer, and happen to be, I think, the largest one at the JCF.
By far, the largest by far.
And you
so if we are the largest in Canada, the largest community foundation in Canada, I'm honored to be a part of it.
And you're doing an amazing job, and you made, I believe, Aliyah to Israel at some point, and you're very well known in both Israel and Canada. So can you describe your personal evolution from being a charitable to being a philanthropist?
That's a great question. I grew up in a very charitable household. Both of my parents led by example, that taught their children but just by their own activities. My father used to give very modestly when at the beginning of his career, and as his wealth grew, so did his giving. So this was something that we learned at home, and so I was quite charity minded, charitable, and but projects would come to me, you know, on an ad hoc basis, and I would look at them and judge whether it was for me, and I would say yes. And some of the projects were quite large and quite interesting, but I wouldn't have called myself a philanthropist. I was busy doing my business activities first and foremost, which took by far the largest part of my time. And then you mentioned that my wife and I made Aliyah. We're coming on 5 years having done so. And I restructured all of my affairs. And you know, making Aliyah was a big decision. And I restructured really all of my, and came to terms with what I wanted to do with this next chapter of my life once we were moving to Israel. And this is when I made my large donation to the JCF, and it really changed my life. So I went from being charity-minded to now being a philanthropist, because I have a formal structure with substantial assets available to do substantial projects. So that's how I became. That is my evolution of, and it happened really in one big decision, which was to make Aliyah, which led to all of the rest of it.
Thank you. Now, what motivated you to sign the Giving Pledge? Would you recommend high net worth families consider signing on, and why?
So, I have good fortune to have much more than I will ever need, more than my children will ever need. And this idea of generational wealth, just if I may describe what the Giving Pledge is, Bill Gates, or the Bill and Melinda Gates, together with Warren Buffett, they came up with this idea that how much generational wealth do you really need to have? And I mean, these are the wealthiest people in the world. And how much do you really need to give to your children and your children's children and your offspring, and generation after generation? And they came up with this idea of recruiting people, first of all, committing themselves to giving away most of their wealth, and to because of course they have so much. They are in the amongst the largest, wealthiest people in the world, and then recruiting like-minded people and getting them to sign the pledge, which is again a commitment to give at least 50% of your net worth away to charity. And for me, as I said, when I restructured my affairs and looking at the bigger picture, I felt that this was a very good way, and it gave me a target as to how much to give away, and I was very proud to sign the pledge. And when I did, by the way, I get a call, and it was I thought it was a prank call. I get a call, and as a lady on the phone says, I have Warren Buffett who wants to speak to you. And I took the phone, and sure enough, it was Warren, and we chatted for about, 20 minutes. Very, very charming man. And I've had the occasion to meet him on many occasions now, and all of the pledgers, the Gateses and Buffett and Michael Milken and Ted Turner, and I could give you a whole bunch of names. And we have an annual retreat every year. Unfortunately, COVID interrupted this year's meeting, and I learn a lot. I have to say, I learn a lot from other people's experience, and these, of course, are some of the most impressive people in the world.
Thank you. How are you preparing the next generation to get involved in your family's philanthropy? And maybe, should I add, how do you align your goals with theirs? Maybe the next generation of Microsoft is saying to their father, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah, this is a difficult one. My wife and I have 4 children. We've been married for nearly 37 splendid years, and now we have grandchildren. We have 2 grandchildren, and my kids are at the beginning of their careers. They're young. They're in their early 30s, and it's very difficult. And they're doing their own thing. None of them are in business with me, with the exception of my son, who's taken over working in the family business in Montreal. But my kids are all over. I have 3 of them are on the West Coast, and they're doing their own place in life. And I feel that bringing in philanthropy in a very formal way with them is problematic, because I want them to concentrate on things that they do. And when they see the kind of money that that Dad gives away, I think it could turn their heads. Why am I working so hard, my salary, and plan my own career when there's just so much money available? So I've kind of they know of what I do. I haven't involved them directly yet. And that's just a matter of time, of course, because I'm not eternal, and eventually they're going to step in. And these are, by the way, these are subjects that we talk about at the Giving Pledge, whether to create a perpetual foundation or whether to actually spend it out and in one's lifetime, in the pledger's lifetime. So these are subjects that we discuss. And also at the Giving Pledge, they have a next generation forum where they bring the children of these very impressive people, and they bring them the children and even the grandchildren of these people, and they have their own retreats and they have their own discussions. So my kids they would have probably gotten involved in one of these retreats this year had COVID not intervened. And we're just at the beginning of this discussion. So it's a good question that you've asked me. And really, we haven't really moved into that, I guess, timing of our lives to deal with that.
And I guess many, I mean, your philanthropic work and business work as accomplishment have brought a lot of people to knock on your door asking for donations as well. How do you deal with that? How do you pick and choose what you want to do?
Again, I tend to choose my own projects rather than have people knock on my door. I'm proactive in my activities, and I don't really like people knocking on my door, but I'm going to give you another very interesting anecdote from Warren Buffett. So this was a question that came up at one of our Giving Pledge conferences at one of the forums. And we were all standing up and sort of explaining how we deal with this issue of people knocking on your door, and how do you deal with somebody who said, for example, says, I lost my job, and I have a crippling disease. My child has a terrible disease, and we need $15,000 to get through this crisis, this personal crisis that we're having. It things like this. So Warren Buffett stands up. She cares about individuals. She's set up to check that they're to do some due diligence and make sure that these things are not a scam. And he says, I give all of these types of requests to my sister, and I let her deal with it. So we each have to kind of figure out how it is that we handle the multitude of requests. I don't have to tell you that there are so many good causes, and there is nobody, even Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, there's nobody who has the bandwidth or the resources to deal with absolutely every good cause. So we have to pick and choose our interests, and I like to think that there's some synergy in the activities that I'm doing. But as I said, I tend to be more proactive.
And it seems like the Jewish world and the Jewish values have of improving the world shaped your giving, and education is a big part of that in the Judaism. So why can you explain the successes and why education is so prominent in your philanthropy?
So look, you mentioned correctly about Jewish giving. And I'm going to come back to the Giving Pledge again, where there's a list of about 260 pledgers, and when I flip down the list, it looks to me like practically 50% of them are Jewish. When you go by their last names, and many of them are well known, of course. And if I tell you that a very small, tiny fraction of those actually engage in Jewish giving. So I've decided for myself that forms really by far the largest. I do some other giving, but by far the largest amount of my giving goes to Jewish causes. Now, with respect to education, what are we as the Jewish people? We're the people of the book. We didn't build massive architectural beauties as we find in Rome and other historic cities. Our temple was destroyed. The only building we ever had was destroyed, and we don't do that. We are the people of the book. Our culture is based on education, and you know, this is what I like to explain to some of these high net worth Jewish people, that they didn't accomplish everything that they did in life all by themselves. It comes with some cultural baggage that they inherited from their ancestors. And again, these are things that need to be taught. So of course, yes, I am very keen on education at all levels, Jewish education. I gave a large donation for the new Herzliya High School in Montreal. I think Jewish education is extremely important. How do you feel Jewish if you don't know anything about your roots? And again, we're not just a religion. We're an ancient people, and we have a history, we have a culture, we have a language, we now have a country, and of course, we also have a religion. We are a very complete ancient nation. And how do you have an attachment to something unless you know it? So I think that Jewish education is extremely important, particularly high school education, but of course, higher education as well. And I'm a donor. You're going to let Sharon in on the action in a minute, but of course, I'm a very proud donor in a significant way to Tel Aviv University as well.
Thank you, and I'm going to jump to Sharon indeed, as we have like 9 minutes, and I see getting some questions here. Sharon, how are you? Tell us how Tel Aviv University responded to the pandemic. What's going on?
Sure. Thank you. Well, first, Danny, I really want to thank you for having me on your esteemed conference and speaking today with both Ms. Assayag and Mr. Adams, who have been incredible and continue to be incredible mentors of mine throughout my career. Is obviously an honor for me to be here. So Tel Aviv University, as you may know, is Israel's largest university, most innovative, most disciplinary in the country, and the pandemic literally put the university at test in mid-March when the global lockdown happened. And some examples how the university reacted was that within 48 hours, we switched 30,000 students to online learning. Not one single student missed one single class. We built a national COVID testing lab on campus within 72 hours that was approved by the health ministry within a couple of weeks and opened. And our faculty, literally, they dropped everything. They started working 24/7 over the past months, even while the campus was closed, in order to find cures, to find vaccines, to find treatment. Something also really incredible that shows how we can fast track even during this pandemic was that the university president, Professor Ariel Porat, immediately mandated faculty to start conceptualizing a center for combating pandemics. And this center, which to my knowledge is for sure the only one in Israel and maybe even in the world, actually just opened last week. And moving forward, the university will share research and collaboration with its international academic and industry partners in order to benefit the world and be prepared that, God forbid this happens again. So ultimately, these immediate steps that the university took, it literally challenged us, the Friends Associations around the world, to also think quickly and react immediately, because every strategic plan and idea that we had for this year, basically, nothing was doable anymore. And so we had to really go back to the drawing board. And so I'm proud to say that within just a couple of days, weeks, I led a international online fundraising crowdfunding campaign that we put together. It was the first international such campaign for the university, and was within the first 30 days plus, we raised over $3 million to support some of the projects that I just mentioned, including, which is also very important, is to provide immediate financial and psychological assistance to our students that were now literally locked out and some of them stranded in Israel for weeks and months because they couldn't go home as the country shut down.
And has your focus obviously changed since March, I assume?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So look, I mean, if this pandemic has shown us one thing, is that in order to thrive and to succeed in this, we have to be prepared for the unpredictable. And many organizations had to reevaluate their strategies and how to approach philanthropy. And by that, I mean, not just giving, but also engagement. And I think that right now, regardless of giving strategy that is probably more important right now, it really showed us that we have to be flexible, we have to be innovative, we have to accept the change, and I think most importantly, we have to be patient. And besides fundraising, which has shown to be more important even, is to stay connected and to engage our friends and supporters during this global lockdown, and now that we're in the second phase worldwide. So we just made calls, to check in on our friends, on our supporters. We offered some incredible webinars orchestrated by the university or by us, the associations around the world. And we've had tens of thousands of such webinars, COVID-related, non-COVID related, it doesn't matter. We also had some treats and some lighter subjects. We had webinars with Michael Douglas, we had Robert De Niro. So people really, we try to not just inform them and keep them informed about what's going on at the university, but try to lighten up their days a little bit with some lighter subjects.
Now, what does it mean for the university to have the philanthropic leadership of Mr. Adams? Well,
so as you heard from both from Kathy and from Sylvan himself, I think Sylvan is an exceptional example of a philanthropist, and not only has he taken leadership financially to support us, but he's showing leadership as the university's board of governors vice chair and a member of our currently global fundraising campaign. It's a $1 billion US dollar campaign that we're running. And you spoke about Sylvan, and Sylvan touched upon his parents a little bit. I think that is the incredible part of continuing the legacy of his late father, Alav Shalom Marcel. And he's continuing with, as we say in Hebrew, Tikkun Olam, healing the world. And it is just an incredible example of leadership on all ends. And I'm personally very proud, of course, to have the privilege to be able to work with Sylvan so closely, and his advice and his guidance have been invaluable to me over the years.
Thank you for mentioning my father, because both my parents were governors at the university. So
correct.
At Tel Aviv University, actually, I inherited my status at Tel Aviv University and my admiration for this wonderful institution.
And we inherited you.
Maybe 1 minute, because you see people are jumping in because we're using the wrong program for this kind of conference, but we don't care. We like surprises. To Sylvan, by giving away your wealth after spending a lifetime earning it, are you not sending a message to your children of why even bother trying your best to succeed? And we got 1 minute.
Quite the contrary. If they want to succeed, now they have a reason to succeed, because their dad is giving away a lot of what they would otherwise inherit. So I think quite the contrary. I think they have to find their own way in life, and of course, I will bring them eventually into the philanthropy that I'm doing, and try to turn it into a family project.
Great. So. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to thank Sylvan Adams for taking the time from Spain, Kathy and Sharon from Montreal. It's been a pleasure, and we definitely hope to see you in person at our Montreal conference, and you, Sylvan, at our Israeli Tel Aviv conference later on, hopefully, next year. And maybe I'll just tell you, we had a conversation with Mount Sinai the other day, actually yesterday, and they said that now they find a lot of stuff they didn't know about the disease. That, for instance, smoking, they thought in the beginning was the worst thing for to get the disease. Now they find out that if you're a long time smoker, you're actually better off. And I told him, wait a minute, and they discovered that if they put you in sauna and relaxation, you deal better with the disease. So I told him, wait a minute, this disease actually gives me a good reason to not meet my mother-in-law. It gives me a good reason to go to the spa and start smoking. So, you know, I didn't see it that way. So just kidding. So anyway, we hope to be done with this pandemic very soon and see you all in person. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us.
Pleasure. Nice to see everybody in Montreal.
Same here. Good to see you, Sylvan. Keep safe.
Thank you, everybody. So now we are off to our next session. You will see again people pop suddenly at the ends of sessions when they're getting on the calls to their different sessions. And now we are going to actually look at a research in the family office space that's been very interesting. So here I have with me right on time. Wow, you're so, in Israel it would never work. I have here with me my good friend Sue Nickinson, Vice President of Marketing and Sales at DART Real Estate. And I have Chris Duggan, VP of Business Development at DART. And we got a nice session coming up. So hi, you guys are in Cayman.
We are. Good morning, everyone. And sunshine greetings from the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, wow. I feel like in the Eurovision Song Contest now. You know, you're from Cayman, nice beaches. We are freezing here in New York. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. So we will have, actually, you have an interesting research that we'll be talking about as well. So maybe we'll just start with what you have to say, and then we'll go with some questions we have here.
Terrific. Thank you, Denny. And again, hello, everyone. So Chris and I are part of a corporation called the DART Real Estate, which is part of the DART family office, which is located in the Cayman Islands. Our global headquarters are here. And in the last few months and years, we've seen a continued increase in family offices that are looking to relocate to the Cayman Islands. And we continue to get a lot of questions about why would you want to come to the Cayman Islands to establish a family office here? So in response to that growing interest, particularly from a lot of family offices that we were talking to in Canada, we felt that it was important to commission a report on exactly why the Cayman Islands are a great location for family offices. So what we're going to do is just share some of the highlights from that report with you. And then after that, Denny, perhaps we can open that up to some questions that you might have or some of the other family offices that are joining our conference today. Can everyone see my screen? Denny, can you see what I've shared? Okay, so just to give everyone a quick update again on who we are a developer that has invested over US $1.5 billion in the Cayman Islands. And most of our investments are in real estate, luxury residential properties, Class A commercial office space. We do have 5 beautiful luxury properties in the Cayman Islands through Grand Cayman, Little Cayman, and Cayman Brac. We also own retail companies and are active participants in public-private partnerships with government. And we also actively support community programs in Cayman. Our team, the one that Chris and I work on, specializes in helping family offices and high net worth individuals relocate to the Cayman Islands and understand what's involved with that process. So as I mentioned, in the last couple of years, as we've been undertaking this work, we have had a growing number of family offices and high net worth individuals say to us, why is Cayman Islands the right choice for jurisdiction, as a jurisdiction for family offices and high net worth individuals? And as a result, that's why we undertook this research, because these individuals and their private client advisors have been asking us for this data. So what we found out when we started to research family offices is that the vast majority of families with a family office structure have at least $100 million in net worth, which is a very exclusive tier of the ultra high net worth population globally. Overall, there are approximately 63,000 individuals around the world with more than $100 million in net assets. Around 80% of those individuals with family office structures have assets between $100 million and $500 million. And this has been very important information for us to understand, but more importantly, the private client advisors in the Cayman Islands who are working to tailor their services to help family offices that are looking to expand or relocate here, to really get a good understanding of that type of wealth and what those individual needs are when they're looking at a jurisdiction like Cayman. And as you can see, of those individuals that have this wealth, they control more than $24.7 trillion worth of wealth in the world, which is more than the GDP of the United States, just to put that into perspective. Sorry, I'm trying to get my next slide to transition and it doesn't want to do that. There we go. So we then asked the private client advisors and the family office representatives, what is important to you when you're choosing a location for a family office? And they said there was a couple of things. First and foremost, it was the needs of the family, but also of their advisors. So it's both needs on a very personal level, you know, what works well for the family in terms of their lifestyle, what works well for their children for education, but it's also the needs of their advisors, because oftentimes the advisors are also relocating with the family, and it's important for them that they have optimum working conditions in the jurisdictions that they're looking at. Secondly, it was convenience and time zone. So it was very important, you know, recognizing that a lot of family offices do have interests elsewhere around the globe, that they were able to access the jurisdiction very easily with convenient airlift. And again, to not have to worry about trying to conduct business when some of their professional service providers might be located in a different time zone elsewhere in the world. The third was the expertise and reputation of the jurisdiction. So we were told that, you know, when people are looking at jurisdictions for their family offices, they want to make sure that it's a credible jurisdiction, that it has a good reputation for sound governance, sound judiciary, and, you know, a well-qualified workforce to provide services. A lot of times too, it starts with family sentiment that initiates the relocation. So for instance, with our family office, Mr. Dart, when he first relocated, he came to Cayman initially on a holiday and fell in love with the natural beauty of the jurisdiction. And he thought that this was a place that his family would like to spend quality time, as well as the many obvious attributes of it as a business location. So again, while it's often a business choice, certainly the personal sentiment of how, you know, the head of the family office feels about the jurisdiction is very important. And the next thing is to note that oftentimes these family office relocations are as much about expansion and not necessarily exiting their existing jurisdiction. And that's what we're getting a lot of inquiries right now. Our families are saying, look, you know, we might have a family office right now in Canada or in the UK or, you know, elsewhere in Europe or Asia, but we're really looking at diversifying our risk. We're looking at future proofing, and we are starting to see a lot of advantages that are unique to Cayman that could work for our family. So we want to start looking at putting an office there as well. And the last thing that's really important is immigration. So, you know, it's one thing to move your business, but it's another to make sure that the family, dependents, and again, that core team of employees will not have any issues relocating to that new jurisdiction. So as we looked at all of the feedback, again, that during this research process that the private client advisors and family offices told us, we said, well, how does Cayman do? Like, you know, are we checking these boxes? And without fail, we were told yes. You know, Cayman has so many advantages that meet the needs of family offices, particularly its location and its tax neutrality. And for that reason, we felt that it was important to share this research with other family offices, such as those located in Canada. And with that, what we'll do now is I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and he can share more of the findings specifically to how the Cayman Islands is well suited to family offices in Canada that are looking to relocate or expand.
Thanks very much, Sue.
Here, take off your mic. Talk off mine.
Sorry, we had the technical issue. Thanks very much, Sue, and thank you, Denny, for hosting us today, and good afternoon to everyone. As Sue alluded to, one of the areas that the report identified for us is that North America is a key target market for the Cayman Islands, and the Cayman Islands is a jurisdiction of choice for family offices located in North America. And so some of the, as you'll see from the screen, some of the attractions to the Cayman Islands for North American families, and at the top of the list, as Sue just alluded to, is the geographical location and the time zone. The Cayman Islands is one of the easiest Caribbean nations to reach. It's located about 500 miles south of Miami. It's essentially in the same time zone. The normal zone, we're exactly the same time as US East Coast during daylight savings time. So right now, up until this weekend anyway, we're an hour behind the US East Coast. And with regard to airlift, it's another massive benefit. We have really good airlift. We have 55 weekly non-stop flights from North America, including from Toronto, from 17 different North American cities. And in our peak season, we have just over 110 direct flights from North America. The English language is obviously a key component. English language is the main language spoken in Cayman, although it is a very cosmopolitan society. We do have over 130 different nationalities. Tax neutrality, which we'll talk about in a little more detail in a few minutes, but tax neutrality is certainly a key benefit and attraction. It's a very safe island. Per capita, it's probably one of the safest countries in the world, and certainly the safest island in the Caribbean region. We have a very reliable telecom structure, extensive fiber-based network from a telecom standpoint, which obviously is critical to anyone looking to either relocate or conduct business from the Cayman Islands. We have a very attractive real estate market. Really we have offerings for anyone, whatever you're looking for, whether it's beachfront, soundfront, houses, condos, whatever it may be. We have an offering for everyone, and we have a very comprehensive, robust MLS system, which will enable a quick and easy search to ensure that we can find the exact property that anyone's looking to either rent or to live in. And sort of finally on the attractions, the lifestyle. The lifestyle is critical. We really have something for everyone in a very reliable, safe, and professional environment. So they're really the main attractions we wanted to bring to your attention, attractions to the Cayman Islands for North American families.
Thank you. Now we have just before we go to a couple of questions I have, do you want to continue with the presentation, or
whatever's easier? Do we have just 2 or 3 more slides so I can finish and ask questions, or whatever's best for you?
Please go ahead.
Carry on. Okay. So just very quickly, the Cayman Islands at a glance. The Cayman Islands is made up of 3 islands, Grand Cayman being the largest and home to our capital, Georgetown. Little Cayman and Cayman Brac. Little Cayman 60 miles northeast of Grand Cayman. Cayman Brac is 90 miles northeast. We have between 62 to 65,000 residents, and as I alluded to, over 135 different nationalities. Very low population density, one of the lowest in the world actually. And in terms of GDP per capita, one of the highest GDPs in the world. From a currency standpoint, we use the Cayman Islands dollar, which is pegged to the US dollar. At $1 Cayman is $1.25 US. As I mentioned, the official language is English. From a climate standpoint, obviously very attractive to many people. It is hot all year round. Very tropical climate. A lot of people ask us about hurricanes. We're located in the sort of Northwest Caribbean, which very advantageous for us, where we typically are sufficiently far south that we don't get impacted too often by the Atlantic hurricanes, which unfortunately our neighbors in the Eastern Caribbean sometimes do, or in recent years have done quite often. And then this time of year with the Gulf hurricanes, we get a lot of unsettled weather. But again, we're sufficiently far south that we don't often get impacted. That's not to say we don't, and we have done, but we're very lucky in that we don't often get impacted by hurricanes. From a political standpoint, from a political status, we're a British Overseas Territory, which is a key advantage we have over a number of other countries within the region. So that's the sort of Cayman at a glance. Just a few quick facts now that will be of interest. Again, from the business side, tax neutrality is one of the key attractive points for the Cayman Islands. So there's no corporate tax, no income tax, no capital gains tax, no inheritance tax, no GST or VAT or equivalent. And from a property tax, there are no recurring property taxes. We have one transfer tax when property is purchased, but other than that, there are no recurring annual property taxes. From a government standpoint, very low debt, very strong credit rating. As I alluded to, we have a very high GDP per capita. British Overseas Territory, it's a democratically elected government based on the UK structure. Immigration is a very straightforward process, and talk a little bit about that in a minute in terms of permanent residency. As I said, English-speaking, reliable telecoms, excellent airlift, as I mentioned, non-stop flights to Toronto. From a professional services standpoint, we have access to some of the top financial service professionals in the world. We have the top 4 accountancy firms. We have most of the top offshore law firms are domiciled here, and in a lot of cases, their headquarters are based here in the Cayman Islands. So very good private client advisors and a very good legal, financial, and trust framework. From a lifestyle standpoint, property ownership, unlike many other countries, is very easy. There's no restriction on foreign ownership. We operate the Torrens system of land registration, where you are guaranteed absolute title of your property when you purchase. We have a very good healthcare system with 3 hospitals, and the number of doctors to residents the ratio is about 4.5 doctors per 1,000 residents. So very strong medical system. From a COVID standpoint, we've contained the COVID virus extremely effectively. Our government has done an extremely good job. We're actually COVID-free status right now, which has been a massive benefit for us, obviously, as we look to restart our economy and get the economy going again. From a safety standpoint, a very, very low crime rate. We're the safest island in the Caribbean, as I alluded to earlier, and one of the safest countries in the world per capita. And the quality of life really is second to none. Again, both from a weather standpoint, but also from a culture standpoint and things to do. So many things to do. And as we say, the Cayman kind culture is evident to anyone who lives here or visits. So that's sort of the island at a glance, and really just wanted to thank you all for listening and open up to any questions that you may have on the jurisdiction, anything that we've spoken about today.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, touched that a little bit here. I mean, what's also interesting about you guys is that you are a family that came to Cayman and fell in love, like you said, with the beaches, but I guess there's more than that. So can you tell me more about the top reasons the Dart family chose Cayman?
Sure. So our principal, Ken Dart, moved here just over 20 years ago. The family's originally from the United States and based out of Michigan. He visited here with his family on a cruise just over 20 years ago. Fell in love with the island instantly in terms of the natural beauty. When he returned home, he looked into it a little bit more to determine, will this be a good jurisdiction for him to relocate his family and his family office to, and obviously decided back then that yes, what the island had to offer over and above the climate and the natural beauty was certainly something that he wanted for his family. And a lot of it I've already mentioned in terms of the attractions, but just briefly going through it again, for him, proximity to the US East Coast was critical. Being from Michigan, he wanted to ensure that from a time zone standpoint and from an airlift standpoint, he was still going to be close to any family and acquaintances back in the United States. So given how close we were to the United States, fantastic airlift, as I'd alluded to, and the time zone, that was critical. Obviously, if he was going to relocate the family office, he wanted to ensure that he could purchase homes for him and his family, and to conduct business. So the no restriction on foreign ownership of property with the Torrens land system was critical for him. absolute title to property. So there was no risk in terms of when he purchased property. There was no risk for that property being lost in any way, shape, or form. The stability of the Cayman Islands being a British overseas territory was also critical, and by extension, we operate a British common law, so that really gave him a lot more security and confidence in the jurisdiction. We have a very robust legal system in Cayman, but there is the ultimate appellate recourse is to the UK Privy Council. So that's just an extra layer of insurance for him from the legal framework standpoint. Also critical to him was a stable government, and we have as I mentioned, we have a democratically elected, very stable government. As with any country, we've got our political issues, but they're very minor in comparison to so many around the world, and a very, very good, solid government we have in place right now. So that was critical. And then on the financial services side, as I alluded to, we do have top accountancy firms, law firms, wealth advisors, and trust practitioners. Again, it was critical to him to be able to structure his estate planning. We also have some pretty unique financial instruments. One of those, or two of those, the foundation law being one more recent legislation that had been passed, but also the Star Trust, which is a very flexible form of trust, which really allows for creative estate planning. It's called a dynastic trust, which doesn't have any perpetuity clauses like most traditional trusts, which have 150-year perpetuity. These trusts there are no perpetuity clauses, which really enables him to conduct his estate planning for generations to come, and it was very attractive for him. So this, I know, will allude to a few more advantages in a couple of minutes, but they were the sort of the main reasons, Denny, why our Prince Ken decided to move here after he visited for the first time.
Oh, thank you. So we have like 7 minutes until the next session, and the financial overview of Scotia that we'll start. So a couple of questions. Soon, not many know, but I do, that you're Canadian, and you moved to Cayman. So besides the weather, no, I'm kidding. Based on your perspective, why is Cayman a great choice for Canadians, besides the weather? No, I'm kidding.
Well, number one, there's a lot of Canadians here. And so I think people always feel comfortable, when they relocate and find people here from the jurisdiction where they've just moved. And the second thing would be, the Canadian business presence. So, when you look at KPMG, when you look at all of the accountants that come from Canada through some of the big four accountancies, EY, PwC, et cetera, they really feel at home. Second thing would be, and our Canadian banks. Scotiabank is right across the street from us. And, we're very happy to have Scotiabank as one of our neighbors at Camana Bay. The second thing for sure is healthcare. Healthcare is a national source of pride for Canadians. And I know we speak with Canadians on a daily basis looking to relocate. They are always concerned about the quality of healthcare here. And Cayman has exceptional healthcare, as Chris talked about, really great service. And Canadians love the fact that your doctor gives you their personal phone number, their email, and you can get in the next day. So healthcare quality is on par, if not, quite frankly, I personally feel better than what I received when I was in Canada. And the last thing is education. So all of our children here attend either schools with British or American curriculum. Every year standardized tests are done, and children here always meet or exceed standardized test results around the globe based on the system that they're in. Our children regularly matriculate to great boarding schools and universities in Canada, the United States, and the UK, or elsewhere across the globe. I have a child who has gone through the school system here, and I can tell you she's definitely ahead when she went back to North America to attend a boarding school. And I think that's a pretty consistent story across the board. The last thing really, in addition to tax neutrality, obviously, as we continue to hear about increases in taxation, I have to tell you that that is something that's of extreme value when you live here as a Canadian, is not to have to pay tax, and Chris has already outlined what those are. The last thing really, Denny, would be the ease of getting residency here. And particularly for high net worth individuals looking to relocate to Canada from Cayman, it is a very straightforward process. We have a program here which is called Certificate of Persons of Independent Means, whereby you invest $2.4 million US in a property or properties. They must be developed real estate. And when you do, you qualify to become a permanent resident for the rest of your life here. You can apply for a variation to have the right to work here in the local economy. And within 5 years, you can apply to get a British Overseas Territory passport, followed by a UK passport. So that's important, you know, again, for families that are looking to diversify, you know, and future plan not only for themselves as well as for their children. It does have a minimum requirement for residency each year, but there are opportunities, you know, as long as you establish the reasons why you're off island during that residency period. You know, and you have a proper plan in place with a good immigration lawyer here to be able to continue to be a globally mobile citizen, but yet establish Cayman as your primary place of residency. And that's when we talk to the banks and we talk to the law firms here, they will say, hands down, the #1 market, geographic market that's keeping them busy right now are Canadians looking for those services. And Chris and I have very good relationship, you know, with the private bankers and the lawyers and the trustees in Cayman. And we know that people typically want to start by talking to us about our family office experience while we're here. They then want help finding real estate in order to qualify for that investment. And following that, they want introductions to people that are qualified to assist them with all their relocation needs. And that, in a nutshell, is what we do and what we are so proud to be able, you know, to help tell the story about the benefits of Cayman and to help Canadian families that are looking at relocating here to make it a very straightforward and smooth process.
And what's involved in that process? You touched that a little bit, and maybe after that, quickly, Chris can talk about the new global citizenship program. Another question here, and maybe I'll just put that because it's from our audience here. How do Canadians get around the departure tax rules?
You know, we are not tax advisors, so we can't comment on that. But what we can do, if you like afterwards, is we are happy to share some information on individuals that can give that advice. We have been asked that before, as you can tell. So we have made a point of being able to help you find people that can help you with that.
And regarding the global citizenship program, a couple of words about that?
Sure, yeah, I know we're running low on time, but it's, excuse me, it's a new program the Cayman Islands government has just introduced, really in response to so much demand from, specifically from North America, a lot of demand from Canada for individuals who are now really working based from home to come to a jurisdiction like the Cayman Islands to be able to work. So it's a new program targeting people who can work from home. It enables you to come work from the Cayman Islands for up to 2 years. Really, the only requirements are you must demonstrate that you do have obviously an income. So it's $100,000 income requirement for an individual, $150,000 for a couple, and $180,000 for a family. There's a nominal fee, application fee of around $1,500. Obviously, we'll need to show the job letter proving that you do qualify on those income requirements. Obviously, a valid passport's required, bank reference, police clearance, just the usual immigration requirements in any jurisdiction. And children may attend private schools here in the Cayman Islands. So it's really, we welcome anyone, and this will become their home for up to 2 years, and they will have all the advantages and benefits of being a resident of the Cayman Islands. So it's, as I said, there's big demand coming out of North America and Canada at the moment. It's a new program. Sue and I would be very happy to talk to anyone who might be interested to answer any more detailed questions, but it's something that we're seeing a lot of pickup for already. It's only just been introduced, and I really think it's going to be a great opportunity for a lot of people from Canada to take advantage of.
Yeah, Denny, if I can just quickly say, I mean, the program went live about 10 days ago, and the government's already had close to 150 applications, again, almost all from North America. I first moved to the Caribbean on a program similar to this, and over a decade ago. And what I will say, it's almost like a try before you buy. And that's what we're hearing high net worth individuals saying is, you know, great, this way I can come down to Cayman, spend the winter there, make sure that this is actually what I really like. And then if they do, they might eventually say, yeah, now I do want to apply for permanent residency. But it's a great solution for those who have always said, what would it be like? And now you have the opportunity.
Great, Sue and Chris. Thank you for being so Canadian and being right on time, like 105. It couldn't be better than that. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you in person soon.
Please come visit. We keep inviting you.
I will definitely with that picture behind you there. Yes. So thank you so much, and I hope we'll see you soon.
You too. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Right.
Thank you. And now we come to a very interesting part of the day. We're very proud to have Scotia as our main sponsors, and they're going to give us the only financial overview of what's going on, which I think is what everybody's worried about. So I'm very pleased to have here Andy Nasr, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Scotia Wealth Management, and Mr. Jacques Maurice, Director at Wealth Management, Scotia Wealth Management. I think everybody I spoke with in Montreal, when I was starting to build a conference there, that obviously will be pushed to next year, Jacques' name came as one of the most appreciated names in the financial world. And Andy, thank you. Good, what is it, morning? It's noon now. So good afternoon, actually. Thank you very much for joining. We have a lot of questions for you. Obviously, you are the only guys to bring the financial side of things. So let's start with your overview, and then I have some questions for you.
Great. Good afternoon to everybody. First, we're leaving Cayman Island, where it's 30 degrees and no tax, to come to Montreal, where we're paying 53% tax, and it's pretty cold today. So good afternoon, everyone, and particularly Sylvan Adams, who just spoke like a few minutes ago, who used to be my next door neighbor in Westmount. So Sylvan, glad you're on, and welcome to our presentation, and special thanks to the US and Canadian Family Office and High Net Worth individual for the invite. So my name is Jacques Maurice for Scotia. I'm with Scotia McLeod in Montreal, and I will be joined for this presentation by Andy Nasr, our Chief Investment Officer. The world is going through an unprecedented period, which combined a huge increase in debt worldwide, along with zero interest rates and negative growth. The mix of these three variables in that direction and in the current proportion never occurred in the history of mankind. To an already overstretched world economy at the end of 2019, we have added $12 trillion of debt for which we have no choice. Government will have to redress their balance sheet, and with the overall world debt at 100% of world GDP, they have exhausted almost all their buffers. Over time, government will need to pay back the debt through a combination of raising revenues and reducing expenses, creating inflation. Which asset classes will benefit from this combination? Our best protection will come from well-chosen equities, which will benefit from higher inflation. We also can say that the traditional balanced portfolio of 60% equities and 40% fixed income is being truly tested as this morning, Government of Canada 5-year bonds were trading at 0.36 of 1%. So we run our portfolio strictly with the use of Bloomberg research, having in mind of reaching reasonable return with a combination of dividend and capital appreciation with the lowest possible risk and only with big capitalization companies. On the Canadian market, we're looking for monopolies. We're looking for basically 5 sectors and 5 sectors only. The financials, the food companies, the railroads, the telecommunication companies, and the pipeline, which goes under our infrastructure sector. We therefore have no oil, no gas, no metals, no airlines, no car companies, in fact, nothing that is like cyclical. Please note that the majority of our sectors have companies paying at least 4% dividend with the applicable dividend tax credit that goes with these dividends. On the American and European market, we own big multinational that we cannot buy in Canada, the likes of the Visas and the MasterCard and the Honeywell. But more importantly, some of the biggest technology and pharmaceutical companies in the world. 2 years ago, our 2 biggest holdings were Royal Bank and TD Bank. Now it's Microsoft and Google. We run our typical portfolio with 70% US dollar and 30% Canadian dollar. And note that we don't buy mutual funds, neither ETFs. On the fixed income side, we like retractable preferreds and preferreds with minimum, or what we call floors, like the EMRA 4.90% preferred, for example. Once again, we like Canadian dividends for their dividend tax credits. We're also considering seriously starting to buy some of the Canadian real estate company known as REITs. As their price collapsed or plunged 50 to 75% this year. We can now buy them at 25 to 40% discount to their net asset value, and their yield range from 5 to 7%. We're also keeping like 10%, or should I say some 10%, in savings accounts. Few days before the US election, like the market today, for example, also considering that the stock market is like highly disconnected with the economy. In closing, if you're a prudent investor and that our investment philosophy is suitable for your objective, our group of like 25 portfolio managers and administrators that already manage more than $7.3 billion would love to hear from you. And now I will turn the meeting to Andy in Toronto. If you want to follow up, Andy, please.
Great. Thanks, Jacques. So we do have some slides prepared. I won't go through the, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So I won't go through all of the slides, but I'll just reinforce some of the comments that Jacques made, because the global economy has certainly changed as a result of the health crisis. As Jacques said, we had concerns at the beginning of the year pertaining to excess indebtedness, and the pockets of excess indebtedness really vary depending on the country and the region that you're focused on. So in Canada, we have excessively indebted households. In the US, we had an excessively indebted government. That's certainly true in continental Europe. And this health crisis really exacerbated the excess indebtedness, meaning that government debt increased quite substantially as a result of trying to deal with the pandemic and stabilize economic growth due to the crisis. This isn't really very different compared to the response that we saw after the global financial crisis, where it was a combination of fiscal and monetary support that was used to engineer recovery and economic growth. And that's certainly the case here. You know, we're hoping that we can sustain the economic momentum that's occurred since March and April, but that ultimately most economies can stand on their own 2 feet. As a consequence of the fiscal and monetary policy, which has been unprecedented and swift, it is likely that economic growth, inflation, and interest rates are going to remain anchored by several factors. So that includes the excess indebtedness. It also includes demographics, with populations aging quite rapidly over the course of the next 2 to 3 decades. So those low interest rates and low inflation are likely going to remain firmly in place. We heard evidence of that this morning from the Bank of Canada, that they thought that short-term interest rates weren't going to move considerably for the next few years. So in that context, if we have low interest rates and low inflation, we need to be much more mindful of how to allocate capital in this environment. And it's those low interest rates and inflation that help us derive expected returns for a whole host of asset classes and ultimately take advantage of the volatility that could surface throughout the remainder of this year, given that we're going to be dealing with the US election, and possibly in 2021, as growth estimates may need to get recalibrated. So as we look forward, at most large economies, whether you're looking at advanced or emerging market economies, are not really expected to achieve pre-pandemic levels of GDP until the end of next year or beginning in 2022. We can debate whether or not a vaccine is going to be broadly available and distributed in 2021, at what point that's going to occur. But the reality is that economic activity has moderated since March and April, as we deal with second wave infection risks, which could cloud growth that was expected to be on the horizon. And that makes investing a little bit more tricky. The reason that we had all of this stimulus put in place was because this pandemic was an exogenous shock that affected both the demand and supply of goods and services. And the response has been absolutely unprecedented. $26 trillion, over $26 trillion was spent by governments with respect to that fiscal and monetary stimulus, which equates to about 30% of GDP. The reason that we don't think interest rates and inflation, one of the main reasons that we don't think interest rates and inflation are going to move up too much, is because the global economy is sitting beneath a mountain of debt. And quite simply, if interest rates move up too much, those excessively indebted households, governments, or corporations will have a hard time servicing their debt obligations and ultimately repaying them. So if we know that interest rates and inflation are going to remain somewhat anchored, that translates into a really, really tough short-term outlook for certain asset prices, but it also means that we need to recalibrate our expectations to affect better risk-adjusted returns and ultimately take advantage of any volatility that could accrue as we try to deal with the current economic situation that we're in. You know, Jacques talked a little bit about government debt. But it's very likely that in a post-pandemic world, we see more and more governments focus on trying to affect an increase in the output potential of their economies, because ultimately they're going to have to repay this debt. And one of the ways that they can use this low interest rate environment to their advantage is by creating fiscal policies that can really help employment and help improve the output potential of their respective economies. So that's something that's going to get more and more talked about, but the reality is that only works if interest rates remain relatively low. And as we look forward to the election in the United States, won't spend much time on this, but the reality is that there's a high probability of a Democratic sweep, meaning the Democrats take control of the White House and Congress, so that's Senate and House of Representatives. And if they do that, it's possible that they can push their policies forward a little bit more effectively, given that they control all of the bodies of government. And one of the pillars of the Democratic policies, in addition to higher corporate and personal income taxes, is significant fiscal spending. And as Jacques alluded to, those higher revenues are going to be very important. So if they tax the high net worth income earners in the United States, the top 1%, which will result in their after-tax income declining by about 7%, and increase corporate taxes, they can use that to facilitate a big increase in government spending and fiscal spending that includes green energy type projects, which would ultimately, if they're done successfully, help improve employment and again get growth really just a little bit more stabilized and going in the United States. One thing I would like to just comment on very quickly before we take questions is just the performance of various asset classes. You know, financial markets have led the broader economy. That usually occurs coming out of every recession. However, leadership is very, very narrow. When we look at equity markets, we have a tendency to, you know, try to determine whether they're expensive or cheap by evaluating a PE multiple. The reality is that in the United States and in Canada, the markets have been led by a handful of technology stalwarts, so large mega cap technology companies. And in fact, if you exclude the performance of those companies, you'll see that the indices are down in both regions, which means that when you look underneath the surface, there are still opportunities that exist, because while the economy has improved, the global economy has improved, there are certain industries that have not participated in the recovery. Specifically, you could think of leisure, hospitality, travel-related industries where unemployment is still lagging. And so that can create opportunities as the economic recovery becomes more broad in nature, and it'll create valuation opportunities within indices in Canada, the United States, and other parts of the world. So very important to be selective, but cannot emphasize how important it is to have a high quality bias, because it is not value, growth, or cyclicals that are really gonna, or defensives that are really gonna lead the way on any given day. It's gonna be those high quality companies that are able to demonstrate cash flow growth, earnings growth, or dividends growth, so that have predictability, that are gonna be the ones that ultimately perform best over medium to long-term time horizons. That's really what we try to focus on. With fixed income, this low interest rate environment poses challenges for investors, because while historically you could rely on nominal yield to generate income in a portfolio, that becomes that much more difficult. If interest rates are hovering around 1% and inflation moves back up to 2%, your purchasing power is getting eroded in any given year. So these low or negative real interest rates, after taking into account inflation, make it very challenging for investors that want income in their portfolio. So we have to start looking outside at other asset classes, which can include some of the prefs that Jacques was talking about, in addition to equities, which have historically been a much better hedge against inflation, as it tends to move higher alongside economic growth. So there's selectivity that's warranted within the fixed income landscape as well. And again, all of this volatility that we expect, whether it's due to the election or otherwise, can create opportunities within portfolios if they are tactically positioned and well diversified. That gives us an opportunity to really allocate capital a little bit more efficiently and hopefully affect better risk-adjusted returns over longer time horizons. And those would be the key messages that we wanted to articulate, but happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. So I have some questions for you, but maybe just before a quick question, I see here, and if you can get out of the screen,
yeah, will do.
That'll be great. Won't dividends be reduced? I think it's about what Jacques talked about before. Won't dividends be reduced when the economy takes a downturn, that in addition to the value of the investment?
Sure, I'll answer this. So the reality is we don't anticipate another recession occurring short term. So it's very important to mention that. When we talk about volatility in the market, we would characterize that as a correction. If we thought there was going to be another recession, that would necessitate a little bit of a different asset mix, and our expected returns would change as well. So our expected returns really reflect just expectations about the economy and growth. So we think that corporate profits will recover, but that the economic recovery is going to be uneven and gradual. Certain industries have absolutely been affected by the health crisis, and it is likely you could see dividend cuts within those industries. Jacques mentioned some of them. So this could be cyclically related industries, energy, materials companies, where we have some question marks about investment and ultimately the support for commodity price that's going to necessitate being able to support dividends for some of those companies. So you really have to, again, when you look at the dividend policy, you have to make sure that the dividends are sustainable, that the payouts are sustainable. And one of the things that we've seen happen more broadly since the pandemic occurred was that companies suspended buybacks. So typically companies allocate about 90%, I'm giving you a rough number here, about 90% of their cash flow to paying their dividends and buying back stock in any given year. Many companies suspended the buybacks given that cash flow was a little bit more scarce in favor of dividends. And while we have had a handful of them cut their dividends, the reality is that, again, it's very industry specific, and well-diversified companies with reasonable payout ratios, like some of the large oligopolies or monopolies that Jacques alluded to in Canada, should have relatively safe dividends going forward.
And I want to ask you, and by the way, I will mention now that obviously you're talking about a very interesting topic. So we did ask Scotia to do another session at our November 5th day. But I want to ask you, do you see, just before I dive into two questions I have here, the markets priced everything? I mean, we are sitting in front of the worst crisis we've seen in our lifetime. The chain reactions haven't even started yet. The Chapter 11s just started. The unemployment, the businesses that are going down forever, some of them, the gaps between the poor and the wealthy. I mean, how could it be that all of that that's still waiting for us around the corner has already been priced? Because the markets were not, falling like I mean, 9/11 compared to this is nothing. I mean, the market's priced everything.
Well, those are some of the things that could cause that correction, Denny. And it's a very good question, right? I mean, we talk about income inequality. It's as wide as it's ever been. So the wedge is increasing. All of these factors that you kind of mentioned really do necessitate what we would call macroprudential reform, where it requires policymakers to address these issues, not by cutting interest rates, but by through thoughtful policy that ultimately can help bridge some of those gaps. So when you look at valuations more generally, we tend to look at, I said, one of the things that equity investors do is they look at PE multiples and they say, well, the PE multiple is high today compared to how it's compared to its historical average. The reality is that we're in a very low interest rate environment. And just like you determine fair value for any asset class, if interest rates are low, that means your discount rate is lower. So the value of those asset classes ultimately change, especially if you don't think interest rates are going to move up all that much. So we have a situation where if you look at corporate profits, no question 2020 is terrible. We're going to see a recovery in 2021, but really what happens over the course of the next 12 to 24 months matters less if you take a very long-term time horizon. And that's really one of the things that we try to focus on when we establish these expected returns. So saying it differently, in an environment where interest rates and inflation are relatively low and where pricing power is hard to come by, there are certain companies, certain industries where we think the valuations are fair, but you probably want to be a little bit more careful with respect to timing and including some of those high quality companies in your portfolio. So it comes down to timing, patience, and having a long-term perspective.
Now, yeah, Jacques?
No, and I was going to add, these days, investing a new dollar kind of precludes that the bond market, where you used to have 3, 4, 5% on your bond, is no longer there. So your kind of options are more limited. You say, hey, do I go gold? Do I go cash? Do I go real estate? Or do I take the longer approach, as Andy said, on the stock market and say, oh, my Royal Bank shares that pays me 4.5% dividend looks pretty good here for a year, 2 year, 3 year down the road. So this is a little bit like what we're dealing with right now, Danny.
Now, interest rates are going to likely to remain lower for longer, at least in part due to various structural factors. In the near term, however, have we hit the bottom in rates, and what is the likelihood that we will see negative interest rates in North America?
So, when important to distinguish between short-term interest rates and long-term interest rates. Short-term interest rates, a good proxy for those are the policy rates that the central bank sets. So when they move their policy rates up and down, that affects short-term interest rates. Long-term interest rates are really a product of those short-term interest rates and something called the term premium. So it's the risk that investors demand for owning longer-dated bonds. And so when we think of the trajectory of interest rates, part of it's going to be affected by inflation expectations and growth expectations. If those move up, you could see long-term interest rates move up a little bit. But again, they can't move up a lot, because if they do, it's going to cause significant disrepair for certain entities within every economy with respect to servicing debt and being able to repay their debt obligations. So we think they move up a little bit, but not so much that it causes, potentially threatens the economic recovery. And I think that's why you're seeing so many central banks be very careful about their messaging, signaling that short-term interest rates aren't going to move up for a long time. And you in fact have many central banks reevaluating their policy framework, where before, they were kind of making that policy dependent on inflation. Now they're going to let the economy run a little bit, where you could see inflation move up even more before they touch interest rates, which is what they're doing in the United States. So they'll move up a little bit. They won't move up a lot. It still doesn't really change the dilemma that we have when it comes to asset allocation and identifying value in a volatile market.
Given that you are that your view are that rates are going to remain low, and earnings expectations incorporate some optimism, what may be a good strategy for investors to consider if they are thinking about putting some of their cash to work in the markets?
Well, Jacques, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I would say, get like a portfolio of securities where I would say the most important thing is to be comfortable with, okay? If you go share side, you will take the longer term side and you say, okay, I'm picking up, but at the end of the day, the key element here is you identify the risk that you're willing to take with that capital, and then use a professional to distribute that wealth in sector where you would be comfortable. If cash flow is an issue, and I just spoke about like the sectors that we like, you're generating like a great cash flow, 4 to 5% dividend. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for when we assemble portfolio is to make 10%. And the 4 or 5% comes from a dividend, from a guaranteed, from a safe payout. And then the other 4, 5, 6% comes from capital appreciation. So by using our Bloomberg research, the idea is to identify good entry point and good exit point, and making sure that you're not caught, but most importantly, that you stay in sectors that you can answer. Like right now, I've got no answer for where the price of oil is going, or where the price of metals is going, or for that reason, so what you cannot control, don't go there, okay? Stay with things that are more predictable. And then if you want to take your chances, go more to the States, go into these, in my opinion, high technology and pharmaceutical companies that for the next 3, 5, 7 years are going to be growing steadily, in my opinion. And these are like must own in every portfolio.
And the elections are coming. How is that going to influence investments, policy?
Well,
yeah. Oh, Jacques, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, just like it's a date, Denny. Okay, it's like obviously, if we change government now, we there's going to be what we are already seeing for the past few weeks: pressure on oil stocks, pressure on and then people are kind of buying renewable and things of that nature, which would be favored by the Biden group. We'll see and adjust. But in my opinion, stay the course, because interest rates won't change and so on. And at the end of the day, the stock market is a place that trades earnings with emotion, okay? And earnings are the key here. They're the key element of what we are looking for as portfolio managers to assemble what we found is best. So at the end of the day, it's don't sell everything and rebuy everything at the end of the presidencies, and I don't think that's the proper thing to do. So just keep the course and adjust with the policies that the new government will put in action.
So in 1 minute that we got left, so the policy support is crucial to shape the path to recovery, and government spending has been a significant part of that. We've seen it all around the place, in the US, in Canada, in many other places. What's your take on how the government will manage the additional debt that they have taken on?
Well, it's got to be deficit financed. We know that because when you look at the fiscal balances for most major governments all over the world, they're not generating a surplus. So this is going to be deficit financed debt. As is the case with most fiscal policy, how effective it is going to be regime dependent. And for fiscal policy to be truly affected, you have to take a very long-term view. So, you know, I think there's probably going to be some expectations, that maybe some hope, some optimism surrounding the fiscal policy, but the implementation could lag, and that can end up affecting expectations near term.
And you think we got hell of taxes await for us to deal with?
Sorry, what was that?
You think we'll see lots of taxes coming, heavy taxation coming on us in the next few years to deal with all of that money spent?
Well, it's possible. Look, one of the easiest ways for governments to de-lever, and this has historically been the case, increasing taxes is not really politically popular. One of the easiest ways for them to de-lever is to make sure that interest rates are pinned at low levels and to allow inflation to go above interest rates. That kind of reduces the size of indebtedness relative to GDP. So I think that's going to be the first option. Fiscal spending will probably be the next option. And then, you know, depending on how quickly the economy stabilizes, you could start to see more people talk about higher taxes, more governments talk about higher taxes, because they do have to raise the revenue to pay for all of this at some point.
Well, thank you very much. We will continue our discussion as mentioned on November 5th. So I'd like to thank Jacques and Andy for answering our questions. And we will continue hopefully in several days.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you very much. So we are getting right into our next session that will be dealing with the Successors governance panel. I already have here our friend David Bentall with the wrong name on your under you, but I'll fix that in a second. When I came, you know, it's funny I mentioned that because Fasken are sponsors of this conference. I sat at a Fasken office in Vancouver when I started to get into building our Vancouver conference, and then they showed me. They said, "You see this building? This is the Bentall family." And do you know that one of the Bentall family members is one of the most interesting family business consultants and an experienced person in this field? And this is how I got to know David. I reached out immediately to him. And I'm very fortunate to have David run our Successors governance panel. David, you'll introduce your panel, and I will. Oh, we got it fixed. Your title. Okay, great. And yeah. So by the way, several of you use the same Philip cord. So all of you are Philip cord, but I'll fix that as well. And David, take it from here.
Danny, thank you so much for inviting us to participate. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And for those of you who are already on the line, the theme for our discussion for the next 45 minutes is going to be successors, looking at governance. So the topic is going to be governance, but the perspective we're going to bring to thinking about governance is that of successors. And so I'm joined by four men who are all successors in their own family enterprises, different generations. And so, gentlemen, before I introduce you, if you hit the top right button, there's three dots, you can change your name. And Michael's got his name. You're on it, great. So just to give a very brief introduction, Michael Faber, we're delighted, Michael, that you're with us. Michael's in Washington, D.C. today, although he hails from New York. He's planning to vote right after our panel. So Michael, we know you'll do the right thing. And Michael's third generation in his family business, heads up their family office. So we're looking forward, Michael, to hearing from you. Greg Simpson is with us this morning. Greg's from Saskatchewan, and I had the privilege of getting to know Greg over a dozen years working with his family. Greg is one of the co-founders of a family business with his brothers, and they export lentils to 80 countries around the world. I guess it's 85 countries at the latest count, Greg. So grateful to have you sharing with us. And Phil Court is with us he's originally from St. Catharines, but I think he's at his Lake Country Cottage, and Phil's family business, he's a G3. He and his brother are active and have been active in the business for a couple of decades together, and they're now beginning to prepare for the transition to the next generation. They're in manufacturing and many other businesses in 15 countries around the world. And then delighted also to have Mark Bannister with us. Mark's a member of G2. He and his brother and sister are co-owners of an automotive business with now 14 dealerships across British Columbia and Alberta. And the eldest member of G3 has just graduated from university, so they're starting to think about succession to the next generation. So I want to thank our panelists for joining us, and grateful for them sharing their time, their experience, and their wisdom with us today. And so want to jump in immediately. I've got several questions for each of the panelists, and so I'm going to start with Mark. Mark, I'd just like you to share with the group, as I've come to know you and your family, you have a very loving family. Your relationships, I think, are, in my opinion, having worked with well over 100 different families, your relationships in your family are closer than the average. What have your family done to help create that kind of unity in the family?
Thanks, David. Real quick, when you said you're delighted to have me, I noticed you had a hard time keeping a straight face saying that, just for the record. And it's been recorded, all right? So we'll be able to look at that later. You know, my parents have done an excellent job of leading the way with family time. They've always made a priority throughout their lives to organize regular family trips that enable us to all get together. We've got such things as planning, we went some Caribbean cruise, African safari, built some homes in Mexico. And my mom has done candidly, just a great job of planning a couple years out in advance. They pay, so you get a free trip out of it as well. And that's really gone a long, long ways for building family unity with us and maintaining our unity. And, you know, my mom and dad have always driven to my brother, my sister, driven home about, a successful family is ultimately what's most important. It's more important than a successful family business, but a successful, loving family is certainly more likely to have a successful, prosperous family business.
Thanks, Mark. I don't know why I haven't got the invitation for the next Caribbean cruise, but maybe you can just put a good word in for me.
There's a reason. There's a reason to have it.
So Mark, with that as a foundation, this unity, travel together and things, and mom and dad emphasizing family, as you've thought about family governance, you started introducing more formality to the family governance by creating a family council several years ago. What have you done as a family to make those family council meetings both meaningful and successful for your family?
David, I would say there was 4 things we did that really made a difference for us. First of all, we developed a regular schedule. We get together 2 to 3 times every year with a formal family business meeting. And then we have 3 or 4 big family events where the whole family gets together. And that includes our business family retreat. And then to go further in that, we've really done a really good job of making sure we get the next generation, so it'll be G3 involved in the planning of the meetings, and we make sure that the agenda has something for everyone. Recently we went to Fino for a 3-day business family retreat, and we spent the morning as a family all together in a boardroom and introducing the kids to our family business, the day-to-day operations, and covering some of that stuff. And in the afternoon, we made sure we had some fun time, and we're out surfing and doing some treasure hunts, some hikes. And then at dinner time, we got together and had a big dinner. And then after that, we played some games. And it's important. I know my brother and sister watching that I won all the family games other than the ones they cheated on. All right. So I'll make sure that we're clear on that one. Okay. And then, really, really important, David, thirdly was, we make sure that if we got some difficult topics, we get them on the table. We've really worked hard to have open and honest conversation. It's enabled us to get past some hurdles, through some hurdles, avoid some hurdles. And as you know, we work closely with you on our employee family code of conduct. And that's really helped us navigate the difficult conversations. And then, related to that is, we want to diffuse the landmines before they show up. We don't want to find them and have them explode. And candidly, sometimes that makes for some really tough conversations, and feelings get hurt, and sometimes it's unpleasant. But it's made for, although difficult conversations, they're good conversations, and I really believe it's been for the best. As you know, we've worked through some things like amalgamation and ownership structure, fair compensation. Do we grow? Do we not grow? When's enough? Do we need more? All those kind of things. That's really, really helped us navigate through those.
Great. Mark, thank you very much. one last question for you, and let you out of the hot seat for a minute. In your family council, the family council is not responsible for making decisions. So as we think about governance, like what is the purpose of the family council? If it's not to make decisions, what is its purpose, or what are its purposes?
Well, I think, again, David, what you helped us do is, one of the things we learned that, learning about governance was that for, many decisions, the family members, they may have a voice, but not necessarily get a vote. And, as when we started working with you, we spent a considerable amount of time, working our way through the three-circle model and understanding who sat in what circles. And that really allowed us to define who was involved in what decisions. And we have, some family members that, although they sit in the ownership circle, they don't sit in the business circle. And so they can't be involved in the day-to-day decisions. But on the other hand, we invited the family council to play a key role and help us understand and determine, our vision, our decision to amalgamate, as I talked about earlier, and really helped us with our family employment policy as well. And again, along those lines is that, really we talked about, education for our family. That was a big part of our family council. If we really want to get, again, as we have generation 3 get involved in the business, and making sure that we're working on their education. And so they're up to speed as they go forward and hopefully in our business careers. And then keeping everyone informed. Although, again, we have some family members that are actively involved in day-to-day and other family members that aren't. But we make sure we do a good job of keeping everybody informed and kind of, the big stuff and some of the strategies, acquisitions, maybe some of the challenges that we're having.
Great. So for those of you who are listening, and I don't know who's making notes, but if I can just take from what you're saying, Mark, it sounds to me like your family councils included information and education and communication, which doesn't necessarily mean decision making. So
exactly.
Really good things that you've done as a family. And I love your phrase that family members in the family council setting can have a voice, but not necessarily a vote. So Mark, thanks very much for those thoughts. Greg, can we turn to you and invite you to pick up in terms of now thinking about governance more on the ownership level? You're partners with your two brothers, and you formed a partnership, I guess, about 40 years ago. How have you governed your business affairs together, you and your two brothers, Tom and John?
Yeah, well, so first of all, when my brothers and I started Simpson Seeds, we had no idea about governance at all. I was only 23 years old at that time. We didn't even know what that word really meant. So when my father retired, we had previously made all the decisions, so we had to really invent a way to make decisions. Because I had the initial idea to expand from the farming business, my brothers were comfortable with me serving as president and CEO. However, because we were equal partners, I wanted to make sure that we all agreed on any significant decisions. So without thinking much about it, we developed a consensus-based approach to decisions as owners. After all, whenever we borrowed money and we took on new risks, we were sharing the risks equally. And it just made sense that we would all agree or we wouldn't take on that risk. So as president, I've always wanted to make sure my brothers were included in decisions and respected as equals. So over the last 41 years, we've made sure the decisions we made were ones where all three of us could buy into it. We didn't know it at the time, but we were developing the philosophy of decisions made by consensus.
Greg, thank you. You talk about consensus, and I've experienced that with your family, being a part of family meetings with you and with your, not just with your brothers, but also with the next generation. Some people think that making decisions by consensus is just not practical. Like, come on, let's be realistic. And people react, it's just, if someone's opposed to things, you'll miss out on opportunities. What has your experience been with this consensus over 40 years making decisions by consensus? Is it really practical?
Yeah, I don't think we've really missed out on any opportunities. We've always had more than enough opportunities to keep us growing and expanding. I always look at it as like a flow of opportunities. It's just a matter of, when you're going to dip in and step into an opportunity. So I don't see like we've really missed anything. We can also respond much more quickly than most companies because if we really want to do something, we just need to check with my brothers, Tom and John, and if they agree, we can commit right there and then. So that's the advantage of being a small, medium enterprise of our size. So anyways, because they know that I'm taking the same risks as they are, you know, I've seldom any pushback from them on any new ideas that I had to propose.
It's interesting, Greg, you know, as I hear you talk about it, you know, as president of the company, you've really not taken the fact that you're president as a reason to try and require your brothers to go along. You've really treated them on major decisions like equals. So that's huge. Now, as I know, about 3 or 4 years ago, I guess 5 years ago, you recruited some non-family members to join your advisory board. And I understand that some of the, on this consensus thing, some of the advisory board members didn't like the idea of making decisions by consensus and said that it was a nice idea, but they couldn't buy into that. Did you have to abandon that idea when you brought advisory board members in, or what happened?
Well, when we developed the perspectives, you know, we would recruit the advisors for the advisory board. We'd include the concept of decision-making by consensus and spelled it out quite clearly as a core value for our company. So we had a few potential candidates on the board that thought that we were naive of, you know, ever working in that type of a process of consensus-made decisions, but we basically stuck to our guns, and we just didn't invite anyone on our advisory board if they didn't share our views. So over the years, it's been critically important for us, and you know, so one of our independent board members, if one of our board members is uncomfortable or in any, you know, don't want to do it, we just believe it's important, and that we just listen closely to what they have to say, and so anyways, after all, that's why we do have them on the board anyway. So we ask them for their advice and input. If we can't persuade them, then we table the idea and revisit the next day and see if we can get on the same page. And if we still can't, we just won't proceed. So, you know, during my career, we've never really missed out on any important decisions with this approach. And so, in fact, I think we've avoided some big mistakes and doing dumb things if we had done otherwise.
That's interesting, Greg. You know, I'm a fan of consensus decision making in a family enterprise context, and I first heard about that from the Nordstrom family. I remember talking to Jack McMillan, who was he was a brother-in-law, not a Nordstrom by birth, but by marriage. And he said, you know, he was one of the co-CEOs for over 3 decades with 3 Nordstrom brothers. And he said, you know, if we didn't all agree, we didn't proceed. And he said, it's never held us back from being able to expand and grow. So just one last question for you, Greg, for now. What do your brothers think about that? Do they feel as strongly as you do about this consensus idea? How do Tom and John feel about that?
I don't think that Tom and John have ever had any issues with it. You know, really, this has kind of been the way we've operated right from the beginning. You know, as a CEO and a third owner, you know, I'm actually a minority owner, but I consider myself as one who works for my brothers. You know, even though we are equal owners, they also, you know, they also control the majority, right? So I've never really tried to push them to do anything that they couldn't get on board with. I can also understand how each one of them might feel as a minority owner, but if the two of us want to do something, you know, we usually get things moving along. Anyways, when you think about it, because we're all 1/3 owners of the company, we're all minority owners. So given that we're like me, you know, minor owners, I never wanted either of them to feel left out or left behind. So their opinions are and their options are overruled. So, you know, I've never. I think it's important that long term, you know, we don't want to have our collaboration or our bond, you know, erode at all. So we've really worked hard on the family unity, you know, to make sure that we're always working together on any important decisions.
Great, Greg. I've got several questions that have come in, and I'd like to just take a moment to deal with some of these. I'm just going to read the question, maybe let you think about how you want to answer. One question, Susan's asked the question, how do you think each family members achieve consensus if different members disagree on the company's future strategy? That's one question. What happens if one brother dies and he has 3 heirs with one consensus vote? How do you reach consensus then? What if 3 heirs can't reach consensus? How does that work? And you think if your brothers were not in the business that consensus would have worked? So maybe just we can't respond to all of those live here, but anything you want to say to those who maybe in particular focus on this idea? And what happens if you can't agree on future strategy, Greg? How do you deal with that? How do you achieve consensus in that environment?
Well, I think, David, that's where we've actually had you help us out, right? So having really, you sometimes need a referee and someone to help work around issues like that. But I don't know, I think it's just something very unique about our family. Maybe some family structures struggle more in terms of what the future plan would be. But, you know, for example, our big, hairy, audacious goal for the company, you know, just how big of a stretch goal can you have? So we did have a BHAG for 750,000 metric tons of exports by 2030. Some of us, I think, thought that was just too big of a stretch, but then you stop and say, okay, a stretch goal is a stretch goal. So you kind of say, all right, I'll concede to that notion that we're going to, really stretch our company's vision and our big, hairy, audacious goal. And if we miss, they say, if you miss the moon, you hit the stars, right? So that would be one of the key areas in terms of big, hairy, audacious goals. In terms of strategy, I do think the family owners do really respect what the managers are bringing to the table as well. So we have a really good senior management team, a CFO who's very strategic in his own thinking and what he brings to the table. But it's always good to have debate and different opinions. But our family's been able to, for whatever reason, it just seems to be the culture, I think, of our family to come together and finally come to consensus on things. And I think the danger is if you don't have consensus on something and you move forward and somebody has a different opinion, basically that could be a drag on you going forward. If you're leaving somebody behind, they're always going to be feeling left behind and feel like their opinions aren't being listened to. So I think it's really important that you work extremely hard on trying to move everybody along on the whole notion of strategies and appreciating that everybody has different appetite for risks. So my brother Tom, for example, is not a big risk taker. So to actually get Tom on board for something is pretty significant. On the other hand, I'm on the other end, right? I'm the guy that's stretching out there and working hard towards taking more risks. So I kind of say, thank God I have him as a brother who can keep me in balance and in check. So that's the way I look at it in terms of risk management as well. So that's how we've operated, David.
Well, and it just goes back to what Mark started off with. We began to think about governance this morning. We started on purpose by talking about family unity, and what Mark's family have done is they worked really hard by vacationing together and having regular meetings to make sure they build unity in a family. And I think if we at the business level don't reach for consensus, then we end up potentially leaving people behind, as you say.
Yeah. And David, what's more important, your business or your family?
Yeah. Well,
honestly,
that's right.
In our case, we put a high priority in our family unity. Yeah.
Well, and I think we need to listen to Mark's mom, who said that, Mark, I think you put it that, your mom's always said that a unified family is more important than a successful business. I think, Mark, I think that's an important principle. Those of you who've got more questions about consensus, I'm very grateful that you're chiming in there. I'm going to share my email address at the end. I'm passionate about the value of consensus in a family business. So if we don't get to all the questions on consensus, I'd be happy to follow up with any of you, because it's a very important topic for me. And I think it's very important for our families. So if I can move on, just managing our time, I'd like to invite Phil Court into the conversation. Phil, you and the other members of G3 that are co-owners, you've all been active in management for much of your careers. How did you, as members of G3, prepare for your roles, both in management and your roles now on the board of directors as governors? Phil, have we got you? Phil, can you hear us? I don't see Phil. Phil, if you're there, send me a text and we'll try and include you in the conversation when we can. I'm going to jump, Michael, to you. Given I don't know what's happened to Phil, maybe he's dropped off the call. Michael, you've got a single family office. Could you please tell us, think about governance from in a family office context? How is your family office governed? Who appoints directors, and how does the governance compare to that of the operating businesses that you have?
Thank you, David. Well, so I'm a G3, but we did have a transaction 30 odd years ago that bought out aunts and uncles from what was then a very small business that they didn't want to participate in. Today, we're a very large business, but really, in many ways, we're like G1s because there's only 6 of us, including spouses, and the next generation is 7. So it's quite a manageable number, and it's very easy to govern. Basically, parents govern, and kids, come along. Now, I spent a great deal of my time thinking about what our family will be like in 100 years and even 500 years when the class of beneficiaries is 75 or 200 or 300. And, here in the US, given trust and estates laws, given that we have dynasty trusts, life is pretty simple. We've got the same 3 overlapping circles between a family council and a family office and a family business. But structurally, best practice is to move to something called a private trust company. And the private trust company allows the family office to operate with a board of directors overseeing all the trusts and of course taking input from the family council. So much of what we plan on doing, we're now beginning to do, but sitting here today, basically along with one of the other G3s, the 2 of us kind of dictate what we want to do. And life as a dictator here in Washington, D.C., well, the whole world knows how that goes. So we'll have to think about that.
Michael, tell us just a tiny bit about the best practice being to create a private trust company that gives you the opportunity to govern with a board. Can you just talk about the nuance or why that has become best practice to have a private trust company?
Sure. Here in the States, you have a choice, and Canada too, between institutional trustees and individual trustees. We have an orientation and a preference for individual trustees. And in the life of having individual trustees, you then have the so-called successor trustee issue and how to bring a new generation of trustees into the family network and absorb the family culture. The solution to the so-called problem of successor trustees and figuring out how to incorporate them, when to incorporate them, how to bring in the next generation's relationships in as trustees is the so-called private trust company, because then you have a corporate board. You could have 7 members, you could have 9 members, and it operates like any other corporate board, although it's a privately held corporation owned by the family. And therefore, you can create a company culture. And if you need to bring on one director of the private trust company, you might have, therefore, already 6 members imbued with the family culture and the ability to convey and transfer and absorb and indoctrinate new board members in a private trust company. Works the same way as it does in sort of a public company. So it's really the answer to, it's the answer the lawyers came up with for the successor trustee problem if you want to avoid having an institutional trustee. Sorry for the details.
No, I wanted the detailed answer. And it sounds to me that one of the major benefits is you have a chance to make, help ensure that the culture is developed and maintained and passed along and transmitted to the next generation, which is an important thing as we think about this is from successor perspective, eh?
Yes, I think everybody on this call can agree that if your family cannot define, express, and communicate through the generations your family culture, then everything can, be put at risk. It just takes one member of some future generation to potentially blow everything up. We have a very particular culture. It's worked very well for us for a number of decades. And we have buy-in from the next generation about our culture and how we live our lives and how we relate to our businesses and the wealth. And now the question is, how can we keep that literally going for hundreds of years, God willing? God willing, there's hundreds of years left for everybody, from the universe.
Great, Michael. I want to jump to a different topic, invite your input regarding this, and then Phil will invite you into the conversation. Michael, I understand you have a family bank as well. Could you tell us a little bit about how that is governed and how people how can people apply to the family bank, and how is that governed?
Yeah, I'll briefly talk about two things. One, the family bank, that's the kind of stuff you can read in the literature. Anybody who's curious about it, there's a lot of information how you do a family bank and how you create opportunities for future generations to be able to pursue their dreams, their interests within the construct of the family. A family bank isn't, it's not a federally or state chartered financial institution. It's just whatever entity, trust, or LLC or partnership you want to form that basically has monies available for that purpose. Having entities structured for a purpose is a way of setting up the answer to the predictable question, because it's predictable. Some future generation, someone's going to say, hey, I want to start a business, a candy store, a farm, a tech company, and I need to borrow some money. That eventuality is predictable. So, what have the best minds come up with? In our particular case, the only thing that we've done as a nuance is we've said, fine, in addition to making sure they're third-party investors and there's market acceptance, we've said we're going to lend you money on a sort of a private equity basis, which means if we give you $1 million and you turn it into $1 billion, well, A, congratulations, and B, 20% of that, it's the 80-20 rule, 20% of that has to come back to the family bank to support the efforts of all the other family members. So the good news is you made 800 million, not $1 billion, and 200 million goes into the common pool. We spent a lot of time thinking about whether we want to have a common trust vehicle or common wealth vehicle to be available as a safety net for all the family members, in perpetuity.
Common pot rather than individual pots.
Right, and that that's the classic number one question about how you keep the company or the family together. And reasonable people can take different approaches to it. We take a very heavy-handed approach that we're keeping the money together, and we hope the family will follow. Other people separate the money, and they hope that with family members and their independence, they will choose to come together. We take some of the choice out of the equation, but I'm not here to argue one or the other necessarily.
But one last word I'd love to invite you to share on that. You've thought about it a lot. Maybe just one or two of the main advantages as you see it of being strong in your opinion about keeping the family pot together. Do you want to just offer one or two quick comments on that?
Well, I'll offer one a major one that is the stories you hear, that if you separate out the money for stirpies or to different family members through the generations, what can happen is in different families will have different experiences. Some will make money, some will lose money. And at the end of the day, you may have a bunch of G5s, some of whom are very poor and some of whom are very rich. And if the purpose of the wealth creator was to provide a safety net for everyone, then that defeats that purpose. And You asked me a question on one of our calls about the Elijah Trust. This isn't our family, but it's a story I heard about another family. Call it $1 billion family, 4 daughters. They decided to do a descendants trust, and the act that was the creative act that I thought was phenomenally brilliant was they created a 5th equal trust, and they called it the Elijah Trust. Elijah is, a guardian angel in the Old Testament. That's what they chose. The notion was that if, in the eventuality, the daughters and their descendants came to find themselves in different circumstances, the Elijah Trust, which would simply just accrue and not distribute wealth, would be there as the ultimate safety net, as the guardian angel. And I thought that's about as good a story as I've ever heard in this area of wealth and family management.
Yeah, and to understand it clearly, it was set up as with an equal portion. So rather than giving a double portion to the eldest, as some traditions would advocate, an extra portion goes to the Elijah Trust as a safety net.
In this case, rather than 4 25s, it was 5 20s.
Yeah, Michael, great example. Thank you very much for sharing. Phil, glad you were able to dial in. I asked a couple of questions to you earlier, and I was going, where's my buddy Phil? So can we just start, you and other members of G3 in your family who are co-owners have all been active in management for much of your careers, but putting on your hat as successors, how did you prepare for both your roles in management, and then for our theme today, how did you prepare for your roles in governance?
Well, essentially, we did grow up in the business, working for 15 or 20 years, and various jobs. In 2003, we did transition from G2 to G3. We chose to run the business as a group of 3 or 4, including a senior executive. That led to silos. It was almost like we were running 3 or 4 different companies. No one was in charge, and we essentially did not prepare for how the 4 of us would govern the business. And you can hear from, it's interesting listening to Greg and Mark's stories, and family businesses are all very dynamic and all very different. And I think our path is certainly different from theirs.
Knowing what you know now, what might you have done differently, Phil?
Well, our company just turned 100 last year. It's old, but the second generation did have a clear organizational structure, which I'd say like with the president and vice president, which was my uncle and my father. However, there was lots of dysfunction in that relationship, and that really led to us creating a structure where no one was in charge, with essentially consensus decision making. But that being said, so for us, the biggest mistake was that we did not put the senior executive in charge from the beginning. He was the only senior executive who wasn't family, but he definitely had the skills and expertise to run the business, and he would have been much wiser in running it than we did as a group of 3. The family members were always the owner managers. That was the only model that we had ever known. We assumed that if we were owners, that we should also be management. That's what the prior generations had done. Each of us had different backgrounds, whether it's finance, operations, or HR, and we just assumed we were all qualified. We just didn't think of the fact that with the experienced non-family executive, that he had the best skills to run the business. And that would have certainly led to a much different outcome from where we got to today.
So Phil, last question for you. Right now, you're now transitioning from a management role where you've been for most of your career to more of a governing role. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're doing that, and also why you're doing that?
Yeah, but by 2010, it became clear that the way that we ran it was suboptimal, and we were not the best to run the company. In fact, we're also very concerned that we're starting to become dysfunctional ourselves, almost taking on some of the traits from G2, and we did not want to continue down that path. It's hard to run a business without a president and having 3 or 4 people in charge. That I think it was a big mistake. And in 2010, we started professionalizing the management. 2014, we formed an advisory board. 2015, we hired a CEO. And then starting in January, we're going to a fully functioning fiduciary board. And we did this in part because when we look back at G2 being dysfunctional and the relationships becoming quite strange, we really want to try to avoid this outcome ourselves. And we think that having a shared governance role will also be better for the company and better for relationships than a shared management role. So essentially, we're separating the business from the ownership, and we're bringing in better people to run the business, and we're focusing on the governance. But also that as we look to the G4 and trying to set that up for success, and it's not likely that they're going to be involved in the business as management owners. So we wanted to create a strong governance structure so that we can transition something to them. You know, they do have the ability to work in the business, but I think that's a different topic.
Well, Phil, what's interesting to me, it sounds like there's two main reasons you're moving to more of a governance model. Your generation. One is, as you were just saying, to prepare the next generation or prepare for the next generation, because they're not likely all to be managed, but also recognizing that although you're trained as a CA, you've got professional training that you bring to the business, that you and your other members of G3 realize that perhaps the best management talent may be from outside the family, and demonstrating some humility and in doing that. So it's fascinating to me. I remember Warren Buffett. I don't know if he's much of a fan of family business. Some of you may have heard him. Warren Buffett was quoted as saying that, you know, if you say that your members of the next generation need to run your family company, it's a bit like saying that your Olympic team should be limited to the sons and daughters of your previous Olympic team. He says it's a smaller pool than we maybe want to draw from. And so, you know, I think, Phil, you're being wise in saying, you know, maybe G4, maybe G3, maybe there's better management talent that we can draw on, hence moving to a governance model for your generation. Thanks for sharing. We're looking at the time. We're 4 minutes before we wrap up. So I'm just going to throw a couple of quick questions out, a couple of our panelists just to comment briefly on. So Mark, back to you if I can. You began talking about your family council. What's one of the main benefits your family has enjoyed from having a family culture and from investing as a family in family governance, which you've done?
David, you know, we learned pretty quickly that, you know, we need to have open communication in our family, in our business, if we're going to get to where we wanted to go. You know, as a close family, we weren't used to some of those, you know, things that made us uncomfortable. And, you know, again, you know, working with yourself, you're willing to help us to, you know, learn to address some of those challenges that, you know, those elephants that are in the room. And, you know, so we're able to work through our family code of conduct, you know, or have some conversations again, although they're, you know, things are difficult, but you got love and respect and openness. You're trying to balance all those things to, you know, to make it work. And it's easy to, you know, be open and honest and hurt someone's feelings. And on the other hand, you know, it's easy to avoid hurting people's feelings when you keep your mouth shut. And so, you know, you really helped us, you know, learn to understand that we've got to be open and with our communication in order to get to where we want to get to.
Mark, would it be fair to say that, you know, as a family, you've always been close, as we started off our call today? One of the things that you've learned through the family council is how to maintain that closeness while learning to talk about the uncomfortable stuff. Is that
absolutely
a fair way of putting it?
Yep.
Great. Greg, last question for you today. What was the original vision when you and your brothers started? You had your dad left you three brothers a farm along with your sister. What was your original vision when you started the business, and has that remained the same?
Our original vision was to diversify from the farming. So my dad is second generation farming. I'm third generation. We actually have a fourth generation running the farms, but we really wanted to do something that would help my brothers and myself actually earn a good living, because it was very difficult in the 70s in the farming business. So what happened because of my time at Agriculture Canada and working with the University of Saskatchewan at the Crop Development Center, we started to experiment with different seeds and new crops such as lentils. And when we built the plant in Moose Jaw in 1979, we started to grow and distribute these new varieties and new crops, especially lentils. And then farmers in the area started to grow these crops, and they wanted to come back to us and say, hey, how can we get this stuff to export? So we just pivoted into exports to sell lentils around the world. And over time, we just kept on expanding on that vision. During our G2G retreat, we did establish a BHAG, as I mentioned earlier, of 750,000 metric tons of shipments by 2030. That motivated our team. We were on a 10% per year growth rate. It was pretty ambitious. We expanded facilities substantially to be able to take on this big, hairy, audacious goal. But as business cycles happen, we did hit a wall with the lentil market crashing 3 years ago. And we had to actually abandon that vision and simply to be able to survive. So now the company's focused more on revenue per ton and becoming uber efficient and more profitable. But when I look back over the last 41 years, we've needed to re-envision and recalibrate our vision several times to deal with the changes that are going on. Everybody knows who's listening here today, even COVID has caused everybody to have to revisit and pivot into how do you manage and be relevant during these times. So anyways.
Thank you. I'm going to have to break in. It's 20 after. We're going to have to wrap up. But I just underline for our listeners, what's fascinating to me is we think in a governance context, what Greg shared, you've had to change your vision several times. I've often thought in governance, you get the vision clear and then we figure out how to manage towards that. You've had to manage to a different vision many times. Right. Denny, do you want me to just close off with a?
Yes, you can stay. I will just take your video out. I have a lot of control here. That's
well. Can you leave my video on for 30 seconds?
Sure, but very quickly we have to start with the next session.
Okay. I guess I'm off. Okay. Just want to thank everybody. Just putting up my thank all of the panelists and thank everybody for participating. Please stay in touch. My email is there if I can help, especially those of you who are interested in talking about consensus further, be happy to do that. And those of you who are interested in succession for successors, a new book's coming out, Dear Younger Me, let me know if I can, maybe for some stocking stuffers for some of your kids or grandkids. So thank you all for participating. Denny, thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, David. If you could just stop the, oh, great. Thank you, David. It's been a splendid session. Thank you, everyone here. And now I'm jumping to the real estate part of the day. I'm very happy to be here with a session that is being run by my good friend Elias, Retsinas from Fasken. Fasken has been a major supporter of ours since we started, and nobody knew who we were in Toronto. Even though some folks said we could never pull this off because Canadian families are very private, we've had our biggest success in Canada, and families in Canada are not that private. Well, they are, but not as shy as one might think. Elias, I'm so happy to have you here. Fasken is a major partner in our also in our Montreal conference that we will get on the road next year, right?
Absolutely.
And we're gonna meet in person. So take it from here, Elias, and introduce your panel and real estate.
My pleasure. And Denny, can you hear me well?
Very well.
Okay, great. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be here today and to moderate this all-star panel. We have Anthony Broccolini from the Broccolini Group. We have Arthur Rosenfield, who is a titan in real estate development south of the border. We also have Anthony Guarnieri, who is very active in the US in terms of investment. So with Group RMC, they're extremely active south of the border and hopefully more and more in Canada over the next few years. But a great cast. We're going to have, I'm not sure if he's on yet, Steve Apostolopoulos of the Triple Group. He let me know he was running a little bit late, but he will be joining us. So the topic of the day is real estate investment in the post-COVID-19 era. We've all had friends, clients ask us, what do we think is going on? Is it anything to worry about? Long term, where is the market going? What should we be looking out for? What opportunities are there? And that's what we're hearing the most is what are the opportunities? I believe Steve is joining us now. That's great. So I was going to start off with Steve, but I guess we could start off with Arthur, and then we can move it on to Steve. In a nutshell, the topic that I would like to explore would be, so that's relevant to family offices, is given the current situation, what lessons have we learned in the last few years? What things should we be looking out for going forward? And I know that Arthur is an expert in creating value and in figuring out what the highest and best use of the property site. So Steve just joined us. Welcome, Steve. We just finished the intros. So we're going to start it off with our good friend Arthur. And Arthur, perhaps you can shed some light on what you've seen through your storied career. What families should be looking out for, family offices, as they go forward during the interesting times. And I know you're going to talk about placemaking and how you feel that's a very important element in creating value going forward, and in ensuring that we find highest and best use of sites and also return for investors. So with that, I leave it to Arthur, and feel free to elaborate on any of those issues. Arthur, over to you.
Elias, thank you so much. And Denny, thank you for organizing this. I want to just say at the outset, it's a great privilege and honor to be part of this conference. The family offices and people of wealth are so important to the real estate industry and to every community. And we thank you for your great concern and consideration for making better quality of life for everyone through your wealth. And so thank you very much. I'm going to try to take you through a process that I have been through. First of all, just say that I am a new president and chief executive officer for a very prominent and well-respected organization, primarily in New York City, National Realty Club, which was founded by Harry Helmsley, a very important person in the real estate business throughout the United States, and specifically in New York. Some of the most important buildings in the city were owned by Harry Helmsley. And the organization, the National Realty Club, is a club of very senior people who come together and share ideas and share business opportunities, and it has been doing that since 1947. The board and I have changed some of the mission of the club to be more vocal and to lead, guide, and organize the real estate industry at this time, because club with the leadership of the most prominent people in the real estate business here really feel that it's important to take that leadership position and try to bring a stronger voice to the real estate community and to the business community and to the financial community. So it's a privilege and an honor to serve as the president and CEO of the organization. And I come to that organization because of a background that I have, which is unique. And I have been in the M&A business, and I've been in the media business, and I've been also the founder of a chamber of commerce in Long Island City, which we'll get to in a minute. And I sit on the board of directors for several other chambers of commerce, including the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce and the Asian Real Estate Association of America, and a few others. And I have a close relationship with John Catsimatidis' company, Red Apple Group, which has a $2 billion portfolio of real estate. So I have a different perspective coming into an organization like the NRC. So I want to start back on this topic of placemaking, because a lot of people really don't know much about placemaking. was kind of a surprise to me because, of course, I didn't know much about placemaking either when I was introduced to it by a guy by the name of David Wilk, who at that time was working with municipalities all over the United States to help them improve their value. And a lot of manufacturing had been lost in most major cities, and cities were having to attract talent, attract employees, create jobs, make their cities attractive. So this concept of making a place became something that was very important. And David Wilk's an expert in that. He's now running the School of Real Estate at Temple University, and we've actually just recently reached out to him. But I reached out to him in 2012 when Long Island City at that time had only 2 large buildings. And Long Island City, just to describe it, is directly on the East River, immediately across from Manhattan. And it was an interesting place because had great subway transportation systems. It was a transportation hub. The bridges were designed to bring cars past Long Island City. The tunnels were designed to bring cars past Long Island City. And Long Island City really was a kind of a cottage industry haven to supply fabricated products for Manhattan and to deal with many automobiles that populate New York City. So it was a kind of a blue-collar neighborhood, and it had tremendous potential, but not very much was happening. And frankly, in 2012, one would say it was the kind of place a young person would grow up in and aspire to leave, because it really didn't offer very much for young people in terms of any future opportunities or creating families or anything else. So I landed in New York City, in Long Island City, and I worked with the community and eventually created this Long Island City Chamber of Commerce. And over a period of a couple of years, I tried to bring some different kind of business experience to the community and different kind of real estate experience to the community. And we landed on this thing of placemaking, which is, just to give you a simple definition, it's really kind of a branding process. And the branding process requires that you have a story and you have a vision, and then you have a way of implementing the vision through various kinds of communication, marketing, and promotion. And so we began a process. David Wilk came into Long Island City, met with me a few times, and then we started something called, at his suggestion, called a symposium. And
Elias, I don't mean to rush you, but given that we started a little bit late, if you could just share with the audience precisely the added value of placemaking, because I think that'll be a perfect lead-in to Steve and then to Anthony. I don't mean to rush you, but I want to hear what you have to say about precisely what it means and how it works.
Sure. The added value of placemaking is that you organize and bring together the stakeholders in the community, the bankers, the educators, the faith-based organizations, the civic leaders, every type of the artists, everyone, and you bring them together and you create this idea of what you want the future of the community to be, and then you work that. And I'll just give you an example, and then we could probably move on. It's up to you. But we recognized that Long Island City was so close to New York City that I went to the local community college as part of a stakeholder, and we created a curriculum for the students to become a virtual travel and tourism operation for the city. And then I went to the state government and to the city government and to those organizations within government that provide tremendous marketing benefits. And we had a meeting with those people, and they described what kinds of resources they could make available. And so whatever it was that we had as an agenda, we went to the various forces that had the capital, had the resources, and had them work together. And that was basically done through the Chamber of Commerce, because that's where everyone had the common respect and stake in the community. So the important thing for family offices to recognize is that anytime you're making an investment in a community, you really have to become much more involved in it than you might think as just making an investment. Because if you follow what happened with Amazon, they didn't take an interest in the community. They just thought they would come in and throw some big ideas and money around. And the fact is they didn't really engage the community. So ultimately some of the community rejected what they wanted to do. So it's very important.
That's in Long Island City, right?
Long Island City. That was after a while, Long Island City became one of the most successful cities in the United States. So it took about 5 years, but the origin of that was placemaking, and it continues to be something that is a very important example. And now we want to bring that to New York City, because in a post-COVID environment, New York City needs to have the same kind of stakeholder effort to bring people together, and through the universities and through the other strong resources to identify what the plan can be. And we've already started to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Arthur. I want to switch gears now and just move over to Steve. So speaking of placemaking, that's something that Steve also knows very well. His group has invested heavily recently in a very famous project, which Steve and I discussed briefly last week, the Detroit site, Silverdome site, and obviously many other projects that you've been involved with, Steve. When we spoke last week, you mentioned something very interesting. You said that one of the keys to your success is agility. And I'm just, wondering if you could elaborate on what has been your recipe, or, the values that your organization holds dear. What should families and family offices look towards as they look to invest in real estate, or as they, if they're smaller projects, they're looking to launch them? If you could just, share, talk a little bit about your group, what you've done, and what you're looking to do in the future, and how you think those lessons could be useful to our listeners.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me on the panel today to talk a little bit about our family business history, I guess you can call it. We had mentioned last time agility. So agility is something that has been with our family for many, many years. Just you got to roll with the punches. Today it's industrial, tomorrow is retail, and it just or vice versa in this situation now. But our little bit about our family business is it's myself, my two brothers Jim and Peter, and my father Andreas, who's the head. And we've been in business for, ever since I can remember going to work with my father. We've always been together and always been doing business together. So we started out in manufacturing plastics many years ago, and we were always buying into industrial properties for our business. And eventually our portfolio of holdings outgrew our actual manufacturing business. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, we got out of the plastics business, and we solely focused on real estate. It wasn't anything new. We were always in real estate. Just the new part was us focusing strictly on real estate and development. And so that's where we are currently. We have multitude of projects underway. One very big project here in Toronto is the Durham Live. It's a entertainment district with a casino and hotels and convention centers and all the things nobody's really using right now. So which leads us into agility. There's a lot of other components to it, where there's some retail and restaurants. But COVID's not going to last forever, and we continue pushing forward with our plans there. being very cognizant of the market today and where things are, but where things will be in 6 to 8 months from now. And yeah, sure, it's challenging, but being able to have a sit down with family at family dinner to decide how these plans come together and how we adjust for the market fluctuations, then you know, it's a pretty easy. You see what's coming down, you make your decision. So it's pretty easy to come to that determination. It's pulling the trigger, which is the hard part, to say, okay, you know what, we're going with it. So so yeah, so you had mentioned the Silverdome. So that property there we bought, you know, prime example is how everybody looks and perceives certain situations. So in 2009, we ended up acquiring the Silverdome property. And at the time, Detroit, nobody was investing in Detroit. Everybody was really just looking at Detroit and saying, well, we're out of here. This, you know, we're not investing here. And we looked at it to say, you know what, this is a very good opportunity. It's really at the low of its time. It's at the low of its market. Let's invest there. And so we bought the Silverdome. We bought, we're probably the largest foreign landowner in Detroit. And so, you know, there's office towers we own, and there's industrial facilities we own. But the big one was the Silverdome. That was an interesting one. It was a single-use property. Nobody, you know, you couldn't really use it as a stadium anymore. We gave it a little bit of a go, but that opportunity had fizzled out. And we remember the mayor, when we met with the mayor said, oh, well, we should do condominiums, you know, do 50-story condominiums here. And I'm thinking to myself, there's places in suburbs of Toronto that don't have 50-story condominiums. Like it was a real disconnect from what her vision was and what was reality. And we maintained, we're going to use the property for the highest and best use. And so at that time, highest and best use was industrial. And you know, many years later, after building some relationships with other users, we ended up striking a deal with Amazon to basically put up a massive distribution center there. So that is there today. It took, and this is important too. So people were so used to seeing this big stadium there, and they kind of wanted it to stay, but they said they didn't like it. It was an eyesore.
I don't know if it's just me, Steve. I think we lost you on the audio.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, we hear you now. Sorry, go
okay.
ahead.
Sorry, where did you hear me? Where did I last?
We lost you for about 10 seconds.
Okay. So now when you go back to the Silverdome, there's a beautiful building there. It's done very, very well. It's an industrial building that's going to provide 2,000 jobs to the community, and well-paying jobs. And that's a prime example of having some sort of plan, being able to roll with, you know, we looked at it as this way, we looked at it as that way. The property was best suited for an industrial building. So that's where we left off.
So the takeaway, I guess, is it sometimes pay to be a contrarian, to take the risk and hang in there. And in this case, it took, you know, I think well over 7 years to reposition the asset and to make it work. So perhaps that's a lesson that I think we could all look at, or as an example today, where many people are I wouldn't say panicking, but are getting a little nervous, is perhaps stay the course, stay calm. And, you know, I mean, if it worked in 2008, where there was probably the worst economic recession in US history since the Great Depression, perhaps maybe even worse than what it is now, perhaps it could work again today. So that's, I think, a very valuable lesson for everybody. And in terms of asset class, I guess your group is looking at industrial, as you mentioned. But I guess you're not shying away from other things. You're saying, keep an open mind and just look for the opportunity, right?
In fact, that's exactly right. We're kind of the contrarian thinkers, where right now, the market is not being very friendly to retail, and at some point there will be a. Did I lose you again?
No, we got you.
Okay. And there will be a tectonic shift in the in that asset class, and it'll come to a spot where it's stabilized, and we look for opportunities. That's the best way. So that's, yeah.
So stay the course, don't panic, think long, and look for opportunities, I guess is the message. Great. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. If we can just switch now to Anthony Broccolini, who as many of you know, is their group is very active in Canada in real estate development. Anthony, I know that you've been involved recently in several high-profile industrial and residential projects. If you could just say a little bit about your group and what you're seeing really on the front lines, both from the service side, where you act as GC, and on the investment side.
Sure thing, Elias. Thanks for having me here today, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to the group. So Broccolini, a family business, very similar story to you, Steve, and active with my dad, my uncles. My grandfather started the business in 1949 in Montreal. He was a home builder, and that's pretty much what he did for his entire career. And second generation came into the business as general contractors and started doing more commercial and industrial construction. So it's probably been the last 25 years that we've gotten into the real estate development game, and it's been evolving ever since then. And we still act as general contractors for third party, but today our business comprises of doing about 75% of our work for our own funds, and then 25% for third party clients. So we started our first real estate fund in 2007. And at the time, in 2007, we basically put all of our eggs in one basket into this one deal. We got lucky with it, did well, and we said, you know what, we want to continue to grow this, but at the same time, wanted to be able to diversify and continue to leverage our expertise. So in 2007, we created our first fund with basically friends and family, people that we knew within the Montreal community. And that's certainly been a big game changer for us on the real estate side of our business. So today we just closed our sixth fund in the last couple of weeks. We raised $360 million of private capital, and that capital is there to go and invest in office, industrial, and high-rise residential. Through our markets, we're active in Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. And so we're definitely, from a timing perspective in terms of our view on the market, definitely very timely in terms of, what we're going to be doing with that capital. And, so give my perspective in terms of just the different market segments and where we're active. So I think, to start off with office, definitely office has had a major impact due to COVID. Work from home is now, it's here, and it's likely here to stay. The debate is going to be how much is it going to stay? Is it going to be, people working from home a day a week, 3 days a week? And so I definitely, think of that and think of the long-term implications from an office perspective. We do have a significant office portfolio and certainly hope, to see people go back to work. But I think at the same time, there is going to be a shift. And I think I also do believe that there's probably not going back to our normal that we've been used to, right? And I think there's been changes, and probably the one change that I definitely think of a lot that I don't think has hit the radar for many is that I think technology has allowed us or has facilitated the work from home, but I still think from a technology point of view, there's going to be a lot more happening that we're going to have to brace for, and it's definitely going to change how we're going to continue to work and live. So, from an office perspective, I think there's going to still be opportunities, but I also think from a tenancy perspective, people are going to rethink how they work. Coming from a family business culture where we have a cook that comes in every day that cooks for our entire staff. Like that culture, we want to maintain that family culture, but at the same time, there's going to be that shift. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how things unfold on the office side. So certainly, in terms of new development, we're still looking at opportunity. And I think for the right tenant, that's going to look for a newer product that can help us, overcome what we're currently dealing with, and introducing, features that facilitate accessibility and health and wellness. I think are going to become very, very prominent. So I think you'll see conversions that take that into effect. And I think for the right type of tenancy, you'll be able to find certain office users that are going to be interested in that. But I think you're definitely going to see a shift in office, and there's going to be a lot of musical chairs and people sort of rethinking how they're going to work. We have a project actually right underneath your office, Elias, in Place Victoria. So we're doing a mixed-use tower there. So we have 330,000 square feet of office, 30,000 square feet of ground floor retail, and sitting on top of it, we have a 60-story residential condo. So, we had actually some very, very good internal debate of, we're literally at the ground floor, at the second floor right now. And a couple of months ago, we were rethinking saying, do we continue as office here, or do we look to convert some to residential? And, because it's new product and because we have the flexibility from a design perspective to make adjustments, I think, we're going to stay course with that investment. And also the fact that, we're on 9 floors within the podium. I think it'll be quite accessible and stuff like that. So that's, view on the office side. As far as on the residential sector, we probably have 2,500 units right now that are under construction as we speak. So we're fortunate with those projects that they're all well sold, between 75 and 95% sold. So we're pretty optimistic on that. I guess the big question is where, where's the market going to go down the road? Certainly with, immigration that's been, that tap has been turned off, and that certainly fuels the demand in that sector. So certainly, as we've seen, within a lot of the major cities, a lot of people have, looked to the suburbs. The suburbs are doing quite well on the real estate side, on the residential side. But certainly the downtowns have slowed. So I think long term, we're definitely there, and we definitely will take that bet, and have also a couple of opportunities also in your neck of the woods around the office there, and that in the next couple of months we're going to have to decide are we making those big bets or not. And so again, still remain optimistic, but what we always say, everyone talks about in real estate, location, and as we were just talking about, I think timing has. I always like to say timing, right? And I think that's certainly very important in terms of our investment decisions on the high-rise, residential in the downtown cores.
To touch on something that Steve mentioned, he mentioned that for the Silverdome project, the highest and best use turned out to be industrial. I know that your group is very involved with industrial real estate. What would you say? What can you say about that segment? Obviously Canada is a very industrialized country, Ontario and Quebec especially. But what would you say to families who are looking to potentially invest in those kinds of assets or reposition them? Long term, what do you think of that asset class?
Well, I think, certainly from our perspective, and especially in this moment in time, we definitely see it as, as the poster child right now in terms of how it's performing and how it's being viewed by the marketplace. So we're quite fortunate. When we look at the different asset classes that we've built and developed in, specifically in Quebec here, we've done over 25 million square feet of industrial over the last 20 years. We think that we're going to probably do another 20 just in the next couple of years, in the next 3 to 4 years, 20 million square feet of industrial between 3 markets. We've been fortunate to have Amazon as a client, as a tenant, and have done numerous deals with them. So we're definitely quite active with them, and fortunate, especially given the times that we're in right now. So.
So sorry to interrupt, but a common theme, the three of you so far have mentioned Amazon. So I think a key takeaway is that perhaps the hit that we're seeing on the retail side, perhaps just a repurposing of demand and repurposing of real estate. Whereas, you had these sprawling shopping centers, now you're going to have sprawling, distribution centers. So it looks like we're at a critical moment in time where we're seeing a shift, I guess is what the three of you have really alluded to.
Definitely a big shift, and have a lot of friends in the retail business, and you know what sort of, you know, that's not our business. I mean, we've built a lot of it, but we don't develop it, and you know, everyone sort of says there that what happened now on the retail side was going to happen. All that happened is the fast forward button got pressed. And, you know, we've basically fast forwarded 5 or 7 years, whatever, you know, that time frame may be. So I definitely think that it's all that's happening is that, you know, that supply chain is just shifting from, you know, the physical store to these warehouses, and you know, crazy stat, you know, from an e-commerce point of view. And I saw this recently during the summer in terms of e-commerce and what it represents from a retail sales perspective, and it's still only 6%. Mm-hmm. And when you think of that, like, I think of what, you know, we're doing on the home frontier, you know, not going to a grocery store anymore, getting everything home delivered because of the current circumstances. You got to think that that's only going to continue to grow. So
create opportunities.
For sure. So I think, you know, it's definitely going to be an asset class that, you know, definitely we're telling our investors that we're remaining firm on it. And I mean, we're still going to have a diverse portfolio, but, you know, it is definitely the one asset class that, you know, that we're placing most of our bets on, and bets that we're probably the most confident with right now, you know, during the time that we're living in right now.
Thank you, Anthony. I just want to switch gears now. Last but certainly not least, Anthony Guarnieri, Group RMC. Anthony's more of the cash flow type investor. So I'd like to hear now from him on what his group is doing and where, you know, where what they're betting on in this interesting period of time. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Elias, and thanks again, Denny, for setting up today. So just to give you really quickly a little bit of background where we come from, we're essentially a real estate co-investment group. And so we participate as LPs alongside all our other partners. And so, you know, we started this back in the 80s. It was just really a handful of friends and families getting together, buying real estate. But over time, that kind of transformed, and more friends, more family kind of participated in, and that sort of continued to grow. And as we gained more access to more investors, more capital, it permitted us to participate in larger and larger deals. So quietly over the years, we've actually become one of the largest landlords in several of the different cities that we operate in. And I guess as a group of families, it's essentially, you know, we have longer term investment horizon. So it gives us the ability to navigate, I guess, you know, wherever we see the best opportunity, right? Like, we don't have to really pigeonhole ourselves in any one particular market. And so because I guess our ability to go and get the best opportunities, well, where we've been finding the best opportunities has actually been in office, but in secondary markets. And we've been focusing our efforts since about late 2010, secondary markets. This is, by the way, where we've become one of the largest landlords. So in Kansas City, Columbus, you know, these are the markets where we've been actually focusing our efforts. And the really interesting thing is, the whole reason why we've been spending so much time there is because we're taking, I guess, advantage of this really interesting market dynamic where there's a lot of institutions that, you know, they have assets and they need to sell, right? And so it could be for multiple reasons. It could be because, you know, it's the end of their, you know, investment shelf life, or, you know, they need to offload their assets for whatever reason, or maybe their company needs a capital injection, right? They need some liquidity. And so what I guess what we've become known in our markets is the liquidity provider to these institutions, to these, you know, groups that are looking for liquidity. And what that does is, because you're essentially buying these properties for sellers, because they're not really selling because it's the best time to be selling their assets. They're selling because, you know, for non-economic reasons. Well, it's allowed us to build a really high quality institutional portfolio at a very, very, very low cost basis, right? And to your point, Elias, you know, our goal has always been focusing a little bit more by generating wealth from the cash flow, right? So we want to get in at a very low cost basis, which allows us to generate a lot of free cash flow as a function of, you know, the rents that we're collecting versus what we paid for those assets, right? And so over time, you know, the way we de-risk from our portfolios is, you know, just by clipping that you know, the rental income that we get, refinancing, and, you know, just redeploying and reinvesting that money into new deals. So we essentially have, you know, real estate buying more and more deals. And so I guess all this to say, what COVID has brought us is more opportunity, because I'll tell you, going back to, let's say, I guess I'll say the first opportunities that we started seeing hit the market were single tenant buildings. And we've, you know, if you look at our portfolio right now, we've very much stayed away from single tenant buildings because we want to make sure that our tenancy risk is in check, right? So we're not crazy about single tenant buildings. And so those were kind of the first opportunities to hit the market that were impacted by COVID, and for obvious reasons, right? If you have one tenant, that tenant doesn't pay, well, as an investor, you know, you're probably not covering your debt service, right? So we stayed away from those. But now what we're seeing is there are some institutions, even actually there's one REIT in particular that we've been circling for a little while now, who's looking for a liquidity injection. And so, you know, you have to tell yourself, like, if somebody's looking to sell right now in this current market environment, is it really, you know, the best time to be selling? And so it's actually bringing some really interesting deals to the market, which as a co-investment group and our capacity to raise equity as a group with other, you know, other families, other real estate families, it's allowing us to acquire these, you know, huge institutional quality deals from these private institutions. But it's allowing us to, I guess, participate in these deals that we wouldn't otherwise be able to have access as one family alone. So we get together with a bunch of other families, and we could, you know, diversify our portfolio and buy very high quality properties at very low cost basis.
So the key takeaway, I guess, just in closing, because I see Denny, but the key takeaway, I guess, is that there still are opportunities. The world is still turning. And even in certain asset classes where they may not be hot in terms of development these days, as cash flow properties, there are still a plethora of opportunities out there. You just have to be careful, pick them properly, and make sure they're properly, you know, the tenants are solid, but that people should not dismiss those opportunities.
Yeah, and I will say, because I know we're closing off, I will say what's actually interesting about our markets is that there hasn't been much construction over the past couple of years. And as landlords there, well, that gives us much more power in terms of our pricing and our rent roll, right? So yeah, so that actually helps us, the fact that there hasn't been construction over the past couple of years.
Just a quick question, and I apologize, Patricia, we're just 2 minutes because we started that session a little bit later. First of all, I prepared the question, and when I prepare a question and it goes to waste, I feel like something was, you know, energy lost. So first of all, Steve, good to see you. Steve was supposed to speak at our first event in Toronto. He's a great guy, and he's definitely going to speak next time. Two things, two questions, all right? Anthony, your structure is so unique compared to the typical closed-end blind pool funds with a 2 to 20 structure. Can you just please once again walk us through the difference and give us some examples where your families have benefited from it? And we have just a question from the audience here. What's happening, and Elias, you can decide who's going to answer that. What is happening with commercial and corporate real estate in times of COVID? You addressed that a little bit, but still, are real estate companies weathering the storm or looking to transition real estate uses for the long run? So maybe just Anthony, if you can just answer that, and Elias, just.
Sure, I'll let Anthony go first.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what we're seeing in our portfolio, right? So going back to the like looking at COVID right now, there's I think an important distinction to make between, you know, city centers, mega cities, and suburban office, you know, non-gateway cities. And I think that, you know, because of the density issue, core cities have been impacted a lot more versus secondary markets. So what we've actually seen in our markets is, you know, companies looking to potentially set up hub and spoke systems where there's, you know, they'll have maybe their downtown Manhattan office, you know, they don't want to lose that because that's their kind of their main office. But then to accommodate for some employees who don't want to go all the way downtown, they're looking at setting up, you know, offices and, you know, secondary offices in secondary markets, which is actually working out really, really well for us. And so the other thing is, you know, being in a landlord to corporate America and having very high quality tenants as your or tenants who are paying their rents. Our rent collection going back since March has been between 98 and 99% on average. We actually have a 1% more square footage leased up as of September 30th versus what we did back in December of 2019. So our square footage leased has actually gone up. And most importantly, and this is actually the stat that I think is really important, the number of tenants looking to renew their leases between 5 and 10 years has actually gone up. It wasn't during, you know, in the middle of COVID, it wasn't. They were all renewing shorter term leases, six months to a year. But what we've seen more recently is actually that's gone up again. So, you know, we're very happy with that, because the longer your weighted average lease term is, obviously, you know, the more predictable that cash flow is. And then Denny, I guess I'll answer your question, or do we have time, or we're running out of time on the fee structure?
Very quickly, because we did run out of time.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of our fee structure, it is fairly unique. We you know, in working with a lot of other families, there is this sense of fee fatigue. So we stayed away from the classic 2 and 20 model, which I'm sure all of you know. And actually, going back to you know, the crux of our operation, the way we've actually decided to charge our fee is a one-time markup that happens upon the acquisition of the property, right? So we mark up our deal, and then nothing else ever happens again. So there's no performance fee, there's no management fee. But why this is, you know, what the opportunity that this has actually presented us is going back to our ability to navigate into any given market. Versus if we had, let's say, a performance fee, well, we would need to absolutely pigeonhole ourselves in momentum markets, right? So you need to know that for sure in 5 years there'll be a market there, and you know that property is going to absolutely increase in value. But by charging the fee the way we do, well, it's actually allowing us to go into any market wherever we're finding the best cost basis versus the quality and the amount of free cash flow that we're able to generate from those properties. Because we're charging it up front, right? And on top of that, 100% of the fees we take in units. So we're fully aligned with all our co-investors and all our families, not only because we participate with our own equity, but our whole reason of existence is these assets, because even our fee is based on units of the actual properties. So yeah.
Great. And Elias,
Well, just very quickly, and obviously Arthur, Steve, and Anthony Broccolini could give a better response than me, but I think what's happening now to the commercial centers, the shopping centers, and other commercial properties is, you know, I think we're witnessing a repurposing of real estate. You know, these are all well-located properties. I've never seen a poorly located shopping center, usually near highways, with typically favorable zoning. So what I'm expecting to see is that, you know, these properties will be repurposed, and folks like Anthony and Steve are going to be buying them up and be redeveloping them, and you're going to be seeing a lot of nice stuff happening. So with key retail anchor tenants. So yes, it's tough now, but I think those properties will prove to be gold mines in the future.
Thank you, everybody. And it's been a great session. And now we'll move to our last part of the conference with Patricia Saputo. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Patricia, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good, good. So,
you hear me well?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I like to save the best for last. But no, Patricia has been at our first conference outside of Israel in New York many years ago.
Yeah.
She's been at our first conference in Canada years ago. Well, actually not so long ago, but several years ago. And I was very fortunate. I mentioned to her I was in town the last year when I was there, and she invited me, and I met her in that beautiful office. And she's been kind enough to hold a dedicated session with us as well. So, Patricia, I think the interesting thing about Patricia is not only from the family perspective, but also as a financial consultant, which is exactly what we also want to discuss here today, because you wear those two hats. I think that's our topic today as well, which is the perspective of a family member and a financial advisor during COVID-19. And Patricia is a certified wealth transition coach and financial coach. And yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts this time. This time, in the sense of last time I interviewed you, this time you're taking the lead.
Right. Well, thank you, Denny, for having me on your webinar once again. Very much appreciate that. So yes, my perspective is going to be very different than, I guess, the last conversation that we had. So today I will be speaking more about COVID-19 and how it's become a great accelerator, and it has done so in many different ways. So I'm going to start by speaking about the 30,000-foot overview, and then I'm going to come down to what the treetop view is, and then I'll get into the forest. And I also want to preface my talk by saying that you can extrapolate this, my comments and the information we gained here, from a perspective of an individual or the executive of a family office, or even from the perspective of a business, whether you're an owner or you're an entrepreneur, or if you invest in businesses. So let's get started. At the 30,000 foot level, we'll be speaking about how COVID-19 has been a great accelerator in the areas of businesses, information technology, medical research, climate change, and innovation. So we know that COVID-19 has begun as a medical crisis, and that surely turned into an economic crisis and then became a social crisis when the government started to close down businesses and implemented the social distancing rules and the lockdowns. We then started to see how COVID-19 was accelerating many different aspects of our day-to-day lives. And in what sense are you asking? So we'll start with the first area, it's in the businesses. So we have realized that businesses that were in difficulty prior to the pandemic, that didn't have enough cash flow to break even, and that didn't have a cushion for the unknowns and the difficult times, couldn't survive the closures put in place by the government. So they were the first to close their doors. It accelerated their demise. On the other hand, there were the businesses that were cash flow strong, and they did have the great runway. And they were able to fare through the closures and took the time to revise their strategies and even pivot their businesses or increase their business potential substantially just because they were in the right business, servicing the current needs that we faced during the pandemic. Secondly, COVID-19 accelerated information technology at every level, from people to businesses. And we see this in the following areas. E-commerce. If you never ordered online before, I'm sure you probably did during the pandemic. Telehealth. People started to see the doctors via Zoom or other forms of technology that we would have never done prior to, and even was illegal to do so prior to the pandemic. Education. We have experienced online learning during these times like we've never done before. And then the dispersion of talent. You actually no longer need to live in the city where your employer is, since you can work from any remote location. They say that that pandemic has accelerated technology by about 10 years. In the short term, we saw how the elderly in the long-term home care were seeing their loved ones via Skype and FaceTime, something that they never used before. Or those who resisted technological change had no choice but to embrace it, as they had to learn how to connect from their homes via Zoom or Teams meetings. And businesses had no choice but to adapt to their employees working from home, where they needed internet setups, connectivity to the work servers, and the cybersecurity protections. In the long term, we will see changes in real estate. There'll be the builders' plans that are going to add office spaces in homes, apartments, and condos, or the reconfiguration of the office space, as we just heard from our real estate panel, and changing the downtown buildings in terms of work, play, live concepts, as Anthony Broccolini just mentioned. Changes in the work schedule have also been revised to accommodate the work-life balance. We are no longer working from 9 to 5 or from 8 to 4. Now, people are starting to work earlier in the morning before the family wakes up. They'll go back to work once the children are in school, and then they'll go back to work again when the children are in bed. And some even work on weekends now that they never worked on weekends before. So the work week has changed substantially, but if you calculate all the hours, I'm sure people are still working the 40 plus hours per week, just that it's split up differently during the day. So productivity has gone up as travel has come down, and people in general would say that they are getting more done, and they are getting more done, and they're also multitasking quite a bit. So for example, you're listening to this webinar while doing a mindless task. You know, maybe that's what you're doing right now as you're listening to today's webinar. The third area in acceleration due to COVID is in medical research. So it's in the pharmas and the biotechs. So some say that the vaccine is a solution for us to get back to business as usual. But is it? And will it ever be business as usual? Should we be concerned about the acceleration of a vaccine? Let's think about it for a minute. Let's think about what it takes to develop a vaccine. The objective of vaccine is to ensure the safety, the immunogenicity, and the efficacy of a final product. And there are many phases to this process. I mean, we obviously start with the research intensive phase, and then you get to the preclinical phase where the tissue and cell cultures are tested on animals in a lab setting. And then you get to the clinical development phase, where you have the clinical trials that are done on humans, and this takes another 3 to 4 different phases, depending on the results that are obtained. Then you get to the regulatory review and approval phase, where you need to get a license for the manufacturing of the vaccine upon satisfying all the criteria that pertain to the safety and the purity and the efficacy of the vaccine, although this can be done at the same time as the clinical phase. Then you get to the manufacturing of the vaccine, the mass production, once the approvals are given. This includes the labeling and the distribution phases. And you get to the quality control phase, where you monitor the potency and the safety of the vaccine itself. So before we can think that the mass population could get vaccinated, it does take time. And if we fast track the testing, and we won't know how true, what the true side effects that one may develop, it is only with time that we will know, and hence why some vaccine developments have halted in their clinical phase trials. And as for the long-term effects, well, we will only know them in the long term. The fourth area that the COVID-19 has accelerated is in climate change. Over the years, we've been hearing more and more about ESGs. So what do they stand for? It's the environmentally friendly, social responsibility, and better governance. So environment, social, and governance. And all this has also been known as social responsible investing. It's also been known as impact investing. And now they're even talking about sustainability, or we hear people talk about build back better. But what does it really mean? It's a key systemic risk of vulnerability. So basically what it is if it doesn't get financed, it doesn't get fixed. So now that everybody is talking about climate change, whether it's individuals, businesses, boards of directors, governments, or nonprofits, we have to look at the government to set the incentives or the laws that will change our current way of living and doing business. So somebody asked the question, where can I buy shampoo that's not in a plastic non-biodegradable bottle? Well, the companies making that shampoo should find a packaging alternative. But without government incentives in research and development, or laws to ban the plastic shampoo bottles that are non-biodegradable, it will be business as usual. Or somebody out there who makes plastic bottles feels the need to make a change in a way that they can be socially responsible, and they have a competitive edge to look for a biodegradable substance to make the shampoo bottles, so that they can manufacture an alternative packaging solution that could be offered to the shampoo companies at either a competitive price or at a premium, depending on the goals and values of the companies, so that the customers could then have a choice to buy a more eco-friendly product or not. Obviously, the price point will be very important, and if we're going to, especially if we're going for the masses. So you can see once again that the pandemic may have accelerated people speaking about and thinking more about climate change, but the pace of change is slower, as it does take time to get there, as many different things need to align. There's the resource capacity, the extrapolation, the manufacturing, and the finished product, and it must be cost effective. The entire life cycle of a product development must be looked at to ensure sustainability as well. And finally, the fifth area that COVID has accelerated is in innovation. The COVID impact on innovation has physically created distance, but digitally it has brought us closer together. While Zoom has linked people from all over the world with so many gatherings in larger numbers, there is definitely a bigger outreach, as I'm sure, Denny, you have seen with your webinars, that you could unite people from many parts of the world all at the same time. Mm-hmm. The future of innovation may be seen in many areas, from education, manufacturing, health, raw materials, food, urban mobility, digitization, climate, that it's no longer about it is made in whatever country, but that it's made in, it's made by whatever business. We should integrate research, entrepreneurs, and education to build a business model that delivers quality of life to citizens. So for example, imagine a child going for an MRI and not knowing what to expect. It's a very scary experience. All alone, going into the tunnel, possibly being claustrophobic and not even knowing it. Now imagine beforehand that child sees a short film, explaining the experience by the film telling a story of going on a rocket ship. And the boy is, sees himself in a rocket ship, being in a tight compartment, going through space with bright stars all around him to the discovery of health that relates back to him as a child. Wouldn't that experience help a child both mentally and physically to deal with the MRI? So although we see these as great accelerators, there's one common denominator, and that's time, whether being fast forwarded or needing it to slow down. So going back to what perspective you are listening to this talk with, it will allow you to see that as a business owner or entrepreneur, or as an investor or an individual or family office executive, there is much change in the world around us. You could be on the demand side or the supply side. It seems that we are coming out of the crisis with a sense of urgency and possibly a sense of direction. There is huge economic opportunity around us, which leads to job creation, businesses growing or pivoting, new ones forming, and investment opportunities. There is something for everyone. So now let me take it down to the treetop level. And what does this all mean as it relates to behavioral psychology? The pandemic has taught us that we could change our behavior overnight when the government sets rules and regulations. For the safety of our communities and the better good of mankind, those changes were immediate and we all adapted accordingly. Change may come about in three ways. Choice, where you might decide to make a change in your life. For example, you decide tomorrow morning that you will lose weight and you do what you have to do accordingly. Circumstance, because something happened to you, you have no choice but to change. For example, you're diagnosed with cancer or lung cancer. If you're a smoker, you have, under the circumstance, you have to stop smoking. Or crisis, an immediate change that takes place as we all have experienced with this pandemic. So what has this pandemic done to the different industries? We have seen a drastic decline in revenue or zero revenue in industries such as airlines, cruise lines, hotels, restaurants, stadiums, arenas, and gyms. And without government stimulus packages, it would be very difficult to climb out of debt, as we've already heard from Scotia McLeod earlier. But think about it. Do you really think that people will stop traveling, going out to eat at a restaurant, watching sports live, going to a movie theater, going to a concert, and working out? Absolutely not. As humans, we have to socially interact. We have to take a break from time to time, be entertained, exercise. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Our basic needs of food and safety, to psychological needs of belonging and love, to self-fulfillment, including self-esteem and self-actualization, are all important aspects of humanity. So these industries are not dead in the water. They will definitely be resurrected, and they will come back, maybe different than what we once knew, possibly stronger, especially if there are new experiences that come with it. It's about reinventing. I mean, we have already heard this happen back in the 1920s. After the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, there were the Roaring '20s. Even after the war in the 1940s and the debt incurred by the governments, it was followed by the 1950s, which was a period of prosperity, which helped pay down the debt. Although that's when the Temporary Wars Measures Act came to being, AKA our tax system. Well, it wasn't temporary after all, was it? So should we be questioning now our privacy today with the apps that help track who has the virus? Is it temporary or will it be permanent? And will that not put a question to our rights and our rights and freedoms? Just food for thought. So let's look at the sectors that have done well during the crisis and that will continue to do well. In the financial sectors, information technology, medical, online business, transportation, construction, and real estate housing. Entrepreneurs will benefit as they see opportunities in these markets and as they rethink or even reinvent what needs are in terms of supply chain management, resiliency of markets and industry sectors, as well as service in areas where service has been lagging. While investors will also benefit as they see the validity of the opportunities that the entrepreneurs see and agree that the needs going forward warrant their capital investment. So coming down now to the third level of at the forest, where we can dissect deeper to evaluate these needs based on what hat you are wearing in terms of your investment strategy. All crises are similar, yet different. They're similar in what respect? They're all due to fear. It's non-controllable. They're highly leveraged. They lack liquidity and they lack confidence. And yet they're different because they come about, whether it's from a financial crisis or the pandemic, and the time it takes to recover. So a view of your risk assessment and stress testing of your portfolio is very important and should be done on a regular basis at different times. For example, at the beginning of a crisis or before a crisis, during a crisis, and again after a crisis. It will test your risk appetite and help you control your fear on a down market, or your greed on an up market. As your psychology plays an important role as things are happening and irrational decisions are being made rather than a rational view that should be actually considered. So your risk assessment, you should be asking yourself, could you sleep at night if your portfolio went down X percentage, or if your cash flow is down X percentage, or if your debt level is too high? Or what about the time horizon of your portfolio? Will you be able to meet your cash flow needs, your capital calls on your private equity, your business operation needs, or your legacy plans? So if you allocate well prior to a crisis and you continue to rebalance during a crisis based on your allocation, it basically forces you to sell high and buy low. You become more systemic and rational rather than irrational as an investor. It should go back to what you are solving for. What are your objectives? Is it about getting the maximum return in the best risk-reward strategy? Is it to use the funds to make an impact in a particular sector? Is it to ensure the minimum cash flow to help maintain a standard of living? Or is it growing your business or pivoting it to a different product line or sector? Or it may be different buckets and different needs that cover many of the above. So let me conclude by saying life is all about ups and downs. And I'd like to use, I won't quote it, there's a Southern proverb that my mom told me the other day that says life is like a staircase. And no, it's not about a box of chocolates, it's like a staircase. There are those that take the steps up and there's those that take the steps down. Fear is based upon what we can't control. The more volatile the market is, the less control we have. The more fear there is, the less rational the market becomes. So if your main concern is capital preservation, then the best way to make money is not to lose money. The power of compounding is just as significant on the downside as it is on the upside. So straight math will tell you that if you lose 50% value in your portfolio, you will need to make 100% return just to break even. And if you lose 25% value, you need to make up 55% to break even. And a 10% loss, you'll need to gain 11% just to break even. Lenin said, there were decades that nothing happened, and then there were weeks that decades happened. So if 2020 will be considered the Great Reset, where a new world will emerge, it will reset and reshape our future. What do you want that future to look like? I thank you for your time and listening. And Denny, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patricia. It's been very interesting. And I hope, as we originally planned, to see you in person at our hopefully Montreal conference. Thank you very much for your exciting presentation.
You're welcome.
And yeah, I think this wraps up our day today. And we'll be back. As you know, this is done in two parts. So November 5th is next week. Next Thursday is our next day. And we got some interesting stuff for you there as well, of course. We will have our technology panel. we will have our discussion about alternative fixed income. We'll have an AI session with the heads of AI at the World Economic Forum and at Boston Consulting Group. So that's going to be very, very interesting. And another Montreal-based family, I'm sure Patricia knows as well, is the Gaspé-Beaubien. And we'll have both Philippe and Francois speak about lessons learned in a family business then, now, and what lies ahead. And as I've mentioned before, our US conference, November 12th and 18th, more exciting families like Epsimatidis, and an AI session with the heads of AI at Microsoft and NVIDIA and H&M and Levi Strauss and many others. So thank you all for joining me. Patricia, thank you so much for keynoting today. And I guess if people will have any questions for you, they can email us or you later on. And yeah, I see people asking for the recording of this. We will share with you a recording as well of the earlier sessions as well. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Patricia. How do they get in touch if somebody wants your thoughts or comments?
You can provide them my email address.
Great.
isaputo@videotron.ca.
Great. So thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.